unless that.
I'm here. I'm just turning the video off to get better audio. Trying to anyway.
Got it.
Very good. All right, well, it's 5:58. Call the meeting to order and we'll get ready, get rolling into some of the administrative work that works for everyone. And if it doesn't, too bad, we're doing it anyway. So yeah, oh boy. Additions and changes to the agenda. Does anybody review the agenda and feel like we need to add anything at this time? No. So next we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the November 11th select board meeting. Everybody has had the opportunity to review those, I hope. Is there any questions or dialogue about those that need to be had? If not, I'd entertain a motion to yeah.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Bill. Board orders. Those also posted to the share drive, and I expect everybody to have the opportunity to review those. Can I have a motion to accept or approve the board orders and sign them?
So moved. Second.
Is there any need to discuss any of those items? No?
So. Good.
Okay. Great. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, Bill. That motion, any opposed? Doesn't sound like it. That was unanimous. So we have a request from Barbara to close the GAR road on or a portion of the GAR road to host an event and keep traffic down on potentially December 14th. It was like you asked Barbara to reach out to neighbors and get some consent from those who would be impacted, and it seems like all neighbors were in favor and support of that.
In addition to the ones that I posted to your folder,
Yeah.
I also emailed Memorial Hall to check with them, but they never responded. And I looked on their website to make sure they didn't have an event, and there's no calendar on their website, but I believe they're closed for the season anyway.
Okay.
So Memorial Hall just was the only one I didn't hear from.
Okay.
I will speak for them and say, I'm sure it's fine.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill. So we discussed this, we really just thought it'd be appropriate to have no through traffic sign on the fishing access sign, and then a closure sign on the other side off of I guess that's Foster Hill or North Calais Road, wherever that changes. I don't think we have like a formal process for doing this. It would just be a post.
Yeah,
have a form.
yes.
Yeah.
I can post a front porch forum. I will also let the two fire department emergency
Perfect.
vehicles know.
Thank you.
If I can make a note here, I think a no through traffic sign at the fishing access, and then a couple of cones in the middle of the road by Tammy Lino's camp. And that way people know not to, because they go too much further, they can't turn around. Or it's very difficult.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess I'd entertain a motion to approve the temporary closure of the GAR road or a portion of it as requested with the conditions that we just discussed. December 14th.
I just have a question about the time of it. It just says
I'm thinking noon till 9 p.m.
So that'll be.
It's half a day at the afternoon.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye. Thanks,
Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. And good luck with the party.
Thank you.
The next item is the approval and the signing of the PBR 4261-E errors and omissions certificate for town listers, which is regarding the Ehrenfeld parcel ID number 210751. And this is the same parcel that we were talking about last time, or this is a different one?
No, it's different.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. John, do you want to speak to that one?
There was no change in the assessed value. It has to do with what part of the property is gonna be taxed at res rate versus non-residential rate. And that's a function of the homestead declaration that the owner fills out. I don't know why it wasn't caught, but we caught it. And here it is.
Okay,
Normally, these don't come before a select board, but our district advisor said this one should.
okay.
So what do you need? Do you need a motion to approve the request? Certificate that it looks like the listers have already signed off on, right?
So I think it's a motion to approve and sign.
Yeah.
Because
Yes,
it needs all your signatures.
I'm just
Okay.
looking.
So
yeah,
now
looks like-
do we want to add the parcel number to it?
It's just nothing. How do you do that?
I can add it to it right now. I'll just do that for you.
That would be great. Thank you. You're watching those things.
Motion, so I entertain a motion. Yep, thanks. Can we get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Sorry, Bill.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Doesn't sound like it. Thank you, Bill. And,
I'm sorry, I was writing the parcel ID. Who moved and made the second?
and moved.
Jamie seconded. Thank you.
The next administrative item is appointing Ann Winchester to the Social Service Appropriation Committee, which at the moment, I think only has one member of the community and Barbara. And so this sounds like a very welcome addition to the newly formed committee, so. Does anybody have any questions or concern about Ann's participation on the Social Service Appropriations Committee?
And would be great. Have we got any further interest from members of the community? Okay. We've advertised a few times, right?
4 times.
Oh my gosh.
The one thing I meant to do last week and forgot was to go back, because I used to be on that committee. And I'm sure I have old emails of people who used to be on the committee. If you would be interested in having that list to reach out to them specifically. Did I? I couldn't remember if that,
If you did, I don't recall.
Yeah, okay.
would you want to reach out to that list to recruit? Or are you happy with?
Let's post it front porch forum.
I think 3 is the perfect.
Three's okay.
Having been
As a former member.
no, it's not,
I wouldn't be
it's
opposed.
just
It's only one meeting.
it's one meeting and I think we have already set it for,
Our email died today, so I don't know.
I said fine, how about 11 o'clock, and.
On the 10th?
On the 10th, and Chris said fine,
Oh, okay, so
So-
that's, looks like.
so it's the
that's-
10th at 11.
December 10th. At 11.
Well, I'll take a motion to appoint Ann.
I will move to appoint Ann to the Social Services Appropriations Committee.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
I'll abstain.
that sounds appropriate, Ann, thank you. Any opposed? Doesn't sound like it. Great.
This is for signing.
And we're running 3 minutes ahead of schedule, so let's keep it rolling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. We We have a 15-minute period for public comments on anything that is currently not on the agenda, and looks like we only have Mr. Delcor as a member of the broader Vermont community, but being nobody else, I'd say it'd probably be appropriate to move on to the audit agenda items. If everybody's comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're gonna be starting off with the FY 2024 financial audit report. And it looks like we've got Richard on the line. You're muted.
Can you hear
There
me
we
okay?
are. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, thanks for having me here tonight. What I thought I'd do is kind of go through the report with you in a few sections. There's a lot of information in here. Obviously, it's a 48-page report. So what I'm going to try to do is go through the highlights with you, not take up too much of your time, give you kind of what I see are the important things to talk about. So if we're starting number one with this 48-page report, the big thing I want everybody to realize is this whole report is really the responsibility of management, Kari, the board, everybody, how transactions get processed, payroll, payables, all that things that happen during the year. So that's the result of this report. I assist in helping prepare the report, but the ultimate responsibility of the report belongs to management. My responsibility is focused on pages 1 through 4. So let's look at that. Pages 1 through 4 is what we call the auditor's opinion. And that's for us to do our procedures and to determine, we have 3 different reports we can give. An adverse opinion, meaning the financial statements are not fairly stated. Qualified report, meaning the financial statements are fairly stated except for such and such and such and such. Or an unqualified report, meaning that it's unqualified and the opinion is clean. We are in this particular year, we have a qualified opinion only for a couple little things. Number one, under the modified cash basis of accounting, we want to investments need to be shown at historical cost, and those records have not been kept to show them at historical cost, and so they're shown at market value, which according to the standards isn't the way it's supposed to be. But you know, as I've told many of my clients, I've always felt that market value gives a much truer opinion of where you're at than historical cost in this, but I don't get to determine gap. So I just have to report as that qualification. The other part of the qualification in the opinion on page 2 relates to the amount of perpetual care funds in the cemetery fund that haven't been tracked to determine those non-spendable amounts. And so we just need to report that that if they haven't been tracked, we can't report non-spendable amounts in that fund. So those would need to be rebuilt to clear that qualification. Other than that, everything else looked good. Clean opinions on the rest of the funds. The only funds that were really affected by this were the cemetery fund, and when it rolls up to what we call the government wide. So other than that, all the other opinion units were unmodified. Let's skip over to pages 7 and 8. So basically 7 and 8 these are your major funds. This is if you look at page 7, this is a balance sheet, which is basically a snapshot in time of your cash assets and liabilities related to each of the different funds, and then comes down to the bottom section of the fund balances for each of the funds. A couple things I just wanted to point out. General fund balance ended the year with a positive 347,871. About 337,371 of that is unassigned fund balance of the general fund, which appears to be fairly healthy. And the other fund I wanted to you can look at the rest of your funds and see the fund balances are pretty healthy in all those as well. The one fund you'll see it towards the end there, the FEMA fund, obviously has a big negative fund balance in that. But that is mostly because you've spent a lot of the money on the FEMA projects, but just haven't received the proceeds in from the grantors yet. So once you hopefully get those proceeds in, you make your match, that fund should clean itself out and be back to zero or have a fund balance of what you design it to be. If you look at the last column on that, on page 7, those are called the non-major governmental funds. That makes up all the other little funds. You have a ton of additional capital projects and special revenue funds. And if you end up looking later on back on pages 39 through 44, you'll find each individual fund back there with a balance sheet and an income statement of what happened during the year with each of those funds. We only put up front the major funds of the town, which are determined by numbers and sizes of the funds. So if you're looking for any of the detail on those would be back in those back pages. And like I said, on page 8 would be the income statement of all the major funds. So it just tells you how your revenues and expenses came in for each of those major funds during the year. And then again, the total wrap up of the non-major governmental funds with all the revenues and expenses for the year there. Kind of skipping over to pages 11 through 31. These are what we call the notes to the financial statements. If you're looking for a deeper dive into what cash is collateralized, uncollateralized, what are our note terms, what are the interest rates, all the different things related to a lot of the fund balances, you get a much deeper dive if you're looking at those footnotes. But I'm not going to go through a lot of that. It would take a lot of time to kind of, a lot of your evening to go through all that. But just know if you're looking for a deeper dive on information related to the numbers and the financials, these notes to the financial statements give that. As I'm looking at pages 32 through 36, you've probably seen these all year long. These are your budget actuals for your general fund. These are probably been given to you in either monthly or quarterly reports from Kari. So you're probably used to seeing a lot of the information in there. Not going to spend too much time on it. Looking at, the general fund is the major increase in revenues over the budget was related to a ARPA transfer. And looking at a lot of the expenses, there's some salaries related to town administrator that weren't budgeted for, and legal fees that were over budget from what the budget amounts were. Other than that, a lot of the other lines were in line with the budgets. And looking at page 35, there is one, I think it was the town hall renovation loan, which had budgeted 40,000, which I don't think that payment had gotten made yet. I think that's just purely a timing difference. And so if you're looking the same kind of thing for the highway fund, the next page is 37 and 38, same kind of deal. You're looking at your budget actual for the year. The big thing that I noticed on here was you were budgeting for a director of public works for 80,000, which it actually had none spent during the year. So I don't think you were able to fill that position. And then there was some benefits contingency, I assume, related to that position, which again budgeted 15 with zero actual. So that made up a big difference of why your actuals were well under your budgets for the highway fund. And as I said, pages 39 through 44, these are all the small funds, the town hall fund, town office fund, technology, so on and so forth. All the information here for those balance sheets and income statements at the end of the year is there available for your review. As required under the standards, when we do an audit, we're required to communicate any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We did have a couple of adjustments that we've talked with Kari about related to bond proceeds and classification of some of the FEMA expenses. Those adjustments were posted and fixed during the audit, but since they happened during the audit, we have to report them in the schedule of findings. Kari's reviewed them and given us a response, which is also included on the report as well. Overall, I thought the audit went very well. I know there was transition in the treasurer position there, and I thought a lot of the work that got done went very well as far throughout the year, and a lot of the adjustments that needed to happen at the end of the year did happen. Like I said, except for a couple of the little things we noted there, I thought it was a very successful audit. We are still working on the single audit, which relates to testing the federal funds that have passed through the town of Calais for the year. That is moving along. I have some outstanding questions that I've been trying to get information from the state on related to the FEMA and how it gets reported on the CFA, because you've now gone from a 75% federal allocation percentage to 90. So I'm trying to see if that change in allocation should be changing your CFA. So once I get those clarifications, questions answered, we'll get our work papers reviewed and get the single audit report issued as well. But again, that's moving along well and well in line with the deadline, which is March 31st. So we're going to make that. I have no problem with making that deadline. Other things that I need to report. I'm required to report certain items related to the audit. We encountered no difficulties in dealing with management or staff during the audit. We had no disagreements with staff or management during the audit. There were no consultations with other auditors, and all entries that we proposed were posted by management. Those are just required communications that we have to have. That's pretty much my presentation. I didn't know if anybody had any specific questions.
Yeah, and go ahead.
So Corey had a letter of response in which he laid out how he was going to respond to some of those things that you pointed out. Did you review that, and is that adequate?
Yes, absolutely. And a lot, like I said, a lot of these these two adjustments that we're really talking about were learning curve adjustments for a new treasurer coming into the position that, you know, there's a lot of intricacies related to governmental accounting and reporting. Once we kind of went over them, those shouldn't be issues in the future. I don't think there'll be any repeat findings next year at all.
Great. I mean, it seemed pretty straightforward to me as well. And Kari, did you? It doesn't seem. I mean, it seems like such a substantial thing in report that it warrants a lot of discussion. But it doesn't seem like there's much to discuss from my perspective. And
no, I mean, as I said
any other
before,
comments?
this was
It
was an incredible learning opportunity. I learned so much about our grants and accounting in general going through this process. I'm pleased. I hope you are as well.
It sounds like a great report. I did have one question about the perpetual care issue. Is that something the select board needs to look at and address? Is that
Well,
an issue that someone needs to address?
If it can be addressed. I have a lot of clients who have this issue where over the years they were not tracking those dollars that people were leaving for perpetual care of either their plots or the cemetery in general. So that money is usually typically money that's come in that you'd earn interest on, and that interest would be used for it, but the money would be unspendable. And so it's just because of the historical records of some of the cemetery funds across the state. I see this problem quite a bit. If you have records where you can dig back and recreate it, you can get rid of the qualification. Some places I go to, they do that and they spend time and get to that point. Other times the records just aren't available to get to that point. So it just becomes a qualification that you have to kind of live with.
Just one quick point is the cemetery fund is actually under the control of the trustees of public funds.
Right.
So I know they're aware of this issue and they're meeting next Friday, the 6th, so I'll remind them.
Okay, all right. That sounds
That's
good.
great.
Thank you.
It also sounds like that kind of plays into the conversation that we had during the last meeting where we were trying to set up a dedicated fund for.
I'm gonna raise that issue as well, see if
as
they
well.
think that's in our interest.
Yeah.
You know, Rick mentioned we have a lot of funds.
Yeah.
A lot of reserve funds.
Great. I guess I would entertain a motion to accept the FY 2024 financial audit report that was prepared by Sullivan and Powers and just reviewed.
So go ahead.
So moved.
Second.
Great. All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Sorry, Bill, and thank you. Great. Then I think we can move on to.
Thank you, Rick.
Oh,
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Richard.
Sorry.
Thank you. I thought, I thought you were on for the next one, but never mind. Thanks. I appreciate it, Richard.
All right, have a great night.
You too.
So the next item, moving on to the internal control checklist.
Yes,
So this is an annual requirement of the state that municipalities perform this, and so I filled out this checklist. I went through it first on my own, then I also compared to last year's version, and it's virtually identical. I will point out, so this is interesting. I mean, I think it's a little bit outdated. It seems to repeat itself in a couple places. It is worth noting that we're limited a little bit by our size. So, for example, generally the best practice is the person who's approving invoices would not be the person writing the check. And that's just unavoidable in our case in some ways. So that's why it's important to have, especially important to have the select board level where you could review something that I sort of nurse through the whole process. Another example of that is opening the mail, you know, so usually in a larger organization, the person who opens the mail is completely separate from check writing or deposits or anything like that. And Barbara does handle both the mail and a lot of deposits. I don't think there's an issue there. There is, I think it's just worth noting, there's a fair amount of trust in our system compared to a larger organization with controller and that sort of thing. But I don't think it's uncommon in these small towns. You see this multiple times, but we do have a strength in that we're not doing our own bank reconciliation. Nemrick, is an outside party that does that. So they're checking, and we discover a fair amount during that process. And if I miss something or if there's just a question, it's a chance to catch up on a monthly basis. So that's it.
So Nemrick basically balances the checkbook.
Yeah, so they're comparing our accounting statements to our checkbook, essentially. Yeah. And the fact that we pay them, but they're not our employee.
Right.
That's a good check. Any questions?
no. Thanks for going through that, and getting it prepared. I think we just need to authorize somebody to sign, probably me. So I'd entertain a motion to authorize me to accept the checklist that was prepared by Kari.
And to sign it.
And to sign it.
Well, it's received, whatever.
To acknowledge its completion and,
We don't do anything, we just keep it on file. There are sometimes in financing cases where they'll ask you, do you have one? Just say yes.
So moved.
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, thank you, and I will sign that. You have a hard copy that's been signed by you as well. Great, thank you, Kari, that's great.
Thank you.
And the fiscal budget. Next agenda item is gonna be the 2026 budget conversation continued. We're running ahead of schedule, so is it anyone from the sheriff's department coming in?
I communicated with both Mark Pullen and Brad Meyer earlier, last week, today's just Monday, last week, to confirm they would be here, and they both said yes.
Okay.
So we're ahead of schedule, so maybe you want to jump to the town plan since Jared is here.
Or we can try to check off some of the other budget stuff. I think that probably
Prepared to
makes
speak to almost everything else, I think. So.
Jared's still doing his homework, so I don't wanna. Anyway, so do you wanna jump into the town administrator, road
Sure.
commissioner
Yeah.
portion of it?
Yeah, so I've had a fair number of conversations about this and been thinking, and I guess it comes down to it. My recommendation is to split off the road commissioner, and create a part-time road commissioner position and, try to hire for it. We may want to start this fiscal year, it's within our budget, or it will be, but certainly for next year, and, you know, it may be a challenge to find a part-time person for something at that level. I'm thinking that probably about 20 hours average would be good. I certainly would start it on an hourly basis, and then if we thought it was consistent enough, think about salary. I mean, that's optional, but as someone who could eventually take on, well, so they would be the manager or the select board's management agent of the road crew. So they're ultimately responsible for the, you know, the personnel hiring, longer term planning, purchasing, liaison to the public and to the select board. So all that work varies quite a bit through the year. There's some times where it's not that much, and other times where it's quite a bit more than 20 hours a week. So and it just depends. Like I said, it may be challenging hiring for that, but it does leave a full-time treasurer, town administrator position, which I think is doable on a full-time basis. And, you know, I still have this sense that those two roles are more aligned than otherwise.
So how would that fit in with what Toby does, or do you see that person eventually taking over Toby's?
Yeah, so I think Toby's an amazing resource, and we should,
Yeah,
you know,
we want him to train.
use as
somebody.
much of his expertise as we can. I think this role could certainly learn from Toby and eventually take on grants. I think there's a natural match there. But as long as we have Toby, at least this first year, I would suggest continuing to have him and just basically have him train this person to also take on grants in the future.
Sort of outside of current people filling what positions they're filling, could you see this position in the future being a full-time position that was also sort of half-time management, half-time actually plowing, grading?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like a working.
You know, we'd have to talk to the union about it. We'd have to work through. I didn't really explore that because I don't think it's within our budget at this time.
Yeah.
But I think that's sort of a natural, and it would, one of the things I like about it is it gives you some flex, because you don't always need 5 full-time people on the road crew.
Exactly.
But sometimes you could really use that 5th person.
Right.
Plowing is the best example of that. So, yeah, I think that would be something to explore. But, you know, we would want to talk that through with the union, for sure.
I think that would be a really challenging, I think theoretically that makes a lot of sense, but you would almost have to have separate rates of pay for the activities, I would imagine, because because the road work that's being performed would be under the collective bargaining agreement and would need to be carved out. And while I don't suspect that there would be, you know, much pushback, it could just get complicated to track the hours. I guess we would just have to be really clear about where the separation of work is.
Well, you said you're gonna talk to, what's his name, Larry at the union, but I'm just having trouble imagining, because this person would be managing. And yet he'd be part of the crew, so he couldn't be a member of the union, but he'd be doing the union work. So Larry might have a real serious problem. with
Yeah,
that.
no, that's why I say we would want to talk that through, and that's not my initial proposal here. That's starting.
Yeah. I mean, I think a kind of keep it simple approach, you know, make sure that we're covering our statutory obligations for, you know, the definition of what a road commissioner
Yeah.
is, but you know, I suspect, you know, in our current situation where we have somebody who has a lot of that HR experience and staff management experience, this individual is going to be more about road resource planning and grant writing and some of those things with, direct oversight of the select board, almost like a liaison of the select board in that role. And I agree with you, Kari. It makes a lot of sense to keep the treasurer and town administrator stuff lumped together. It just seems like that's the most realistic alignment of skill sets if we were looking to hire for that position in the
Do you
future.
think you could do a job description? That would help me quite a bit
Sure.
to grasp what this position might be and
Have
whether this person even might exist.
Have you had any conversations with the road foreman about this, just to kind of start
Yeah.
puzzling through that?
Yeah.
At all, and
They were supportive.
yeah.
Yep.
That's good.
Yeah, they get it. It's, it's just a lot. And frankly, the right person who had a little more bandwidth to attend to their needs and like, I try not to neglect them, but the reality is I'm not fully living up to that set of responsibilities because I just don't have the time. They know they can call me when they need me, but I think someone who is more proactive and more involved on a regular basis, which is part of what attracts me to somebody being able to drive a truck, is just having a little more knowledge. Like I'm pretty ignorant of a lot of the things that they deal with.
Well, Corey, one of the things I think you said, I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, is it could be select board.
Well, I think that's quite a common arrangement in Vermont.
Yeah.
Are you volunteering?
No, I'm just trying to understand how a select board member could possibly do that.
Well, it's a part-time job, right?
It
So,
would have, I see, that's what you meant. Yeah. That person could happen to also be a select board member.
yeah.
That seems like, sorry, I was just thinking about that more and got distracted, but, so as far as budgeting, goes for the next budget cycle, we'll kind of earmark a certain amount of funds to be appropriated to kind of cover that.
Yeah,
scope of
so
work
if this makes
as
sense to
like
you,
an
what I would
extension.
do is pull the separate treasurer position out and basically allocate most or all of that to part-time road commissioner. Remember the last draft I shared with you
Yeah,
had a full-time treasurer,
Yeah.
or it was $60,000 was allocated to treasurer.
yeah.
So that ought to be able to cover at least a road commissioner.
And that's gonna go under, the road budget or?
We're on the road budget,
Road budget,
yeah, and when you look at our budget, we've tried just about everything over the
Right,
years,
right.
And this is only going back 3 years. We've had road commissioner in there, we've had director of public works.
Right.
So we already have a road commissioner line
Yeah.
account set up.
Okay. Great. I think that makes sense. Sounds like that would make sense. Look at it. Bill, do you have any input?
No, I think that sounds smart to separate them.
And the next item is the medical insurance conversation.
Yeah, so as I said in my memo, I've heard from everybody who currently participates in the medical plan. No one's opposed, people that I think have had a chance to look at, are there providers in the network? Are the medications that they're taking, their family taking, part of MVP's formulary? All that seems good. And I don't relish changing. There's always something, right?
Yeah.
It's not gonna be easy. However, given the savings, and I have it at more or less around 20,000 a year, depending on how, what assumptions you make about who's getting healthcare. I recommend we make the change because that's real money. And we can always change back next year if it really doesn't work out.
Would we,
So, yeah.
would that change happen at the fiscal year change or?
No,
would
it's a
change
calendar
now?
year. It would happen in January.
Great.
Wow.
So we'd save some theoretically on this year's.
Yeah, that's right. Well, no, that's not right, because MVP's rates are going up as well, they're just not going up as much.
Right.
I haven't actually, I can't tell you how MVP's rate, 2025 rate compares to Blue Cross's 2024, but I'm pretty sure it'll be higher, but that is a good thing to point out, that when we're talking about the budget, it splits the year. The calendar year and fiscal year. So there is an application there, I'd like to have formal approval to go forward.
So you want the select board to approve?
Yeah,
Barbara, you've got a question, and I have a question as well.
You go ahead and ask your question. I have a comment. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I'm just trying to puzzle through, I guess, how this, that's kind of an interesting consideration, given like how those rates are going to be, if we continue like this cycle of having to make regular changes, how do we, budgetarily make, preparations or, representations for what we anticipate, future, increases to potentially be, or budgetary impacts to be, and whether or not we should be building in some of those anticipated rate change, even if it's like.
you're saying for the second half of fiscal 2026?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
if we're gonna be looking at,
not unreasonable.
if we're gonna be looking at increases of multi-digit increases, or this is the now second year in a row that premium increases have been north of 20%, or I'm sorry, north of 10%. And that's a pretty significant adjustment to our budget to be making, and something that is likely gonna hit the budget before we have an opportunity to adjust for it.
So we'll sort of make an assumption that the second half of next fiscal year, we'll see a
Gonna go up.
8% jump
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Something,
Just
something.
even if it was just 5%, even if it just nominally represented some
Okay.
sort of inflationary.
I can do that, I can
increase.
plug that into the next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barbara.
So, as you guys have been talking about budgeting and how benefits are such a high cost for the town, I've been talking to Kari and Tegan over the last few months. And so Kari asked me to go ahead and talk to the select board this evening to let you know that in April, I would like to, cut back my hours so that I'm no longer full-time, which means I won't be earning the benefits. So Kari can adjust the fiscal year 26 budget to reduce the benefits appropriate to me cutting back to part-time. And we've been talking about this for a while. So in the coming weeks and months, we'll also submit to you guys a proposed staffing plan for how we recover that in the town office. Tegan and I have been working real closely on that. So probably in April or May, I'd like to go to halftime. That will help. Hello. That will help your benefits for fiscal year 26.
Well, that's.
But we won't have you.
You'll have me, just not as much.
How are you gonna do that?
How are Kari and Tegan gonna do that?
We'll figure it out. We'll get through it together.
Well, that's a very generous thing to offer, Barbara, and thank you. Yeah, that's a stark reality. But thank you. Well, so I'd entertain a motion then, to authorize, Kari, to apply and make the switch to MVP standard, in insurance benefits, from Blue Cross to, MVP standard gold plan for, full-time staff. Right? Full-time.
For calendar year 2025.
For calendar year 2025.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion or questions?
One other question, is there any discussion needed with the union? Is that, you've already had that, or it says that?
It
or
says
equivalent,
comparable in the
so
contract.
we don't-
Yeah, I mean, I'll just confirm with them,
Okay.
but John and Tyler are well aware of
All
this.
the employees were
Yeah.
okay with it.
Yeah,
Good.
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
I,
And any opposed? Unanimous?
great.
Thank you, Kari, for doing the legwork and looking into that.
Yeah.
So we'll jump back, to the sheriff's department. We were running a little ahead of schedule, so we'll, circle back, and thanks for joining us. Yeah, I mean, it was already there and it's not intended to be a hot seat, but
Whatever works for your gal,
Yeah.
that works.
and we have some new board members, so, gentlemen, wouldn't mind giving some introductions. That'd be appreciated, and then we can.
Go ahead, Brett, first. Okay, my name is Brett Meyer. I'm the captain with the sheriff's department, second in command. I'm the patrol supervisor. I've been in charge of patrols since about 1997-ish. And been running it ever since, along with the highway safety details.
So I'm Mark Pullen. I am the sheriff of Washington County. I've been in office for almost 2 years now. I'm a Barrie native. I lived in Vermont most of my life, other than school and the army. So, yeah. With that being said, before we even get going, I only brought one copy, but I've been doing all the town reports for the year. So it'll be coming via email and in snail mail, but I brought a copy anyways.
Oh, okay.
So just as a sneak preview, since I finished it literally today. Thought we were coming, so. So before, Brett is the supervisor for the patrol program. The department's divided up into a few different divisions. So he literally has been running this program since I was in college. So he is the wealth of knowledge when it comes down to it. The budgetary stuff is handled by the sheriff when it comes to the employment stuff, the cost of doing business, the physical plant of the sheriff's office, which, as you guys are well aware, challenging is not the word. And so that is bleeding over into our patrol division, our traffic control division, all of that, as the cost of business is just skyrocketing. So that being said, we've made a lot of changes over the last year, which are in the report of what we're doing. But the cost of doing business is just, it's out of control. And, unfortunately, we're having to make a lot of changes to go with that. But in any case, anyway.
I'm gonna say, I'll just make some comments in reference to what you just said here. He's a man who hires, fires, and does all of that. One of the big things that I will say, I know I've read one of the recent articles with, I see David Halport on there, having to do with, employment, et cetera. You guys are ordering a new grader and a new dump truck or it's on order or whatever, so we know you guys know what money's there. We have 2 cruisers sitting in the yard that we still trying to get fully outfitted, ready to go. What used to be about $30,000 to outfit a cruiser, which was not long ago. Now we're just figuring it out today, we're looking for the 2 cars to be at $114,000. And that's just where we're at. And that's where, when we start looking at increased rates, it isn't solely just for paying staff, it's also to be able to afford the equipment. And unfortunately, that just, he and I begged, borrowed, and steal, didn't have to say in words, equipment for years to be able to outfit the department. Got a lot of stuff for nothing, we're able to go and make it work. Unfortunately, that stuff is now out of date, so I'm having to buy literally new equipment in order to outfit cars. So it's making it really difficult for us. I don't know if you want, nope, you listed these out or you didn't hand it out?
I did not.
Okay. I'll use his copy to work out those here, but, one of the things years ago, and this wasn't long ago, we were running about 33.75 an hour, and whatever the federal mileage rate was, and I think it was around 67 cents a mile. So you can see what we're basically charging per shift, which was about 134.75. When Mark took office, we ended up having to make some changes and trying to boost up pay because basically people were leaving. And our last day is Friday, so we're losing another one. But anyways, with that said, we ended up going up to $60 an hour at the federal mileage rate, so we're about $213.50 per shift.
Effective July 1st, our intent is to go to $66 an hour. Part of that is we have a person who will be going to the full-time academy in February. Hopefully we'll graduate, the end of May. With that, generally when somebody's level 3, they're gonna get paid a little bit more money by all means.
That's the highest certification you can get in the state.
Yeah. So that said, as well, what we're doing is going with what the federal mileage rate is. I put 77 cents per mile there as a figure, but using whatever the federal mileage rate is plus 10 cents. And the purpose for that 10 cents is going to go into equipment. So that's where that money is actually gonna go. So we can actually deal with trying to offset this additional cost, what it's costing to, in fact, for cruisers as well as for the new equipment to outfit them.
Interject for just a minute?
Yes.
So just a little history, when I started in the sheriff's office full-time in 2007, we had 40-something deputies. As of right now, we have 16 total. Of those, 8 are full-time employees. So what we used to do, especially for patrol stuff, we would have many part-time employees that were either retired troopers, retired whatever, or guys that had multiple part-time jobs, or one that worked at Price Chopper and he worked for us a couple hours a week. They would come in at a per diem rate, which was, basically $18.75 an hour, was the kind of where it was set. No benefits, no retirement, no nothing. They would get their hourly rate and go. Those people are gone. We have none of them left at this point. Everything that's being done is our full-time staff outside of nights and weekends. If a handful of those part-time officers still want to work. But the vast majority of our work is being done by full-time employees, which means benefits, retirement, and overtime. So anytime a town wants people at night, we've been eating the overtime cost at night or weekends and all that other stuff. The cost has gone up just because those per diem employees are gone. So it's full-time staff doing it all, and it's expensive. We provide full health insurance. We provide the MVP Platinum plan. As you guys have just run the numbers, you can imagine what those are for full-time employees. So the environment of us doing business has changed dramatically, never mind the economy on top of that.
Can you say that again? I think I missed that. You said that you guys are at 16 now, employees total, and 8 of them are full-time, or, yeah.
Including myself. The other ones, once in a blue moon, will cover like a basketball game or, a school dance. Sometimes a weekend traffic control detail, but them to come in during the day and do a patrol shift or something, those days are over. We basically have no patrolmen outside the full-time staff because nobody wants to do it anymore.
I can say when I started, that's a long time ago, there were people standing at what we call BEV's desk, which is a dispatch desk, waiting for calls to come in for work. And they would go out from there. That's a no-go now.
It's sad. Society has changed. The policing culture has changed. Hopefully the pendulum will swing again, but.
Yeah, how many positions do you have open? Do you have open full-time positions that you're hiring for?
Sheriff's offices are a little weird. We're actually a small business. So theoretically, we used to have, 6 deputies in court. Now we have 1. So we could take those positions back because now they're filled by contract employees through different security companies or some state judiciary people. So there's always openings for those we could theoretically take back. We could probably use 1.5-ish full-time employees to help cover some other things in the great scheme of things. But the big agencies are incredibly challenged hiring anybody, and like Montpelier PD is the best example. They are starting right now, day 1, 0 experience at $34 an hour. It's really hard to compete.
I have one more question I've been really wanting to ask you guys.
Go for it.
So I have a friend who works in the sheriff's department in another state, and I've tried to convince him to move to Vermont because we need people with families and the whole bit. And one of the barriers for him is his time served and his benefits, and having to do the calculus around having to leave his benefits or taking a cut on his potential benefits and working towards his pension. And are departments looking at like trying to honor or create some sort of reciprocity to draw folks in with experience and training, from other sheriff's departments?
So pay-wise, most of us look at, training and experience like any employee.
Right.
And adjust accordingly within our finances. As far as the retirement system goes, here in the state of Vermont, you basically, Burlington is in their own retirement system, just themselves. Everywhere else, it's either VEMR's or the state retirement system. Our deputy staff, full-time staff, are outside of the state deputies, are in VEMR C.
Okay.
So unfortunately, that's a state decision to honor other states' pensions. We have zero control over that. Now, there's been a little discussion in the legislature. I've heard rumblings, but nothing of any substance.
Now, as far as certification, we have a waiver program.
Mm.
And unfortunately, I'll tell you what happens is they basically have to submit a resume. And the academy determines what they have to do or not do. And for us, we can't even quote what it's gonna be because we have no idea.
Yeah, that seems like the easier problem to solve to a certain extent, but I wasn't surprised in knowing other individuals who are wrapped into state pension plans and that sort of thing. Like it becomes a real impediment to, it forces you to home grow all of,
Believe it or not, people leave this state to go to other states.
Right.
For their pension. plan,
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And not being taxed on their retirement.
Right.
So.
Sorry to distract with
No,
that. That
that's
was
fine.
good,
That is
yeah.
fine. Good time. I just do want to say something about the budget sheet that I put out there. I put figures out there. And just understand where I went with it is up to you what you guys decide that you want. But what I did is, right now, it's basically 3-hour shift. If we were to do one shift a week for 52 weeks, it comes up with one figure. Back years ago, what we used to do is do 2 to 3 shifts a week and used to have a swimming program at Curtis Pond. That was a big deal, and basically they wanted us here a lot for that. So we generally were running 2 shifts or more during the week, during the summertime, and then the rest of the year, we're running 1 shift a week. So that's where that second figure comes from. One of the things that just as a suggestion, and again, it's up to you, how you really want to do it, is the winter months, a lot of times there's not a whole lot going on. Do we want to shift a month? Do we want to shift every other week? I guess kind of put it to you guys as far as figuring out what you have for money to spend as well as what you feel is what you want. And especially for summertime or the busy time. I say summertime and really that's not it anymore because I can remember complaints now with this change a little bit in weather. Come April, I'm getting calls from you guys that we got problems. So the summertime, which used to be from the time school got out until the time school started, or in the first part of September when school first started, I was getting a lot of complaints throughout the summer. Now it's starting in April. So just as a thought, however you decide you want to do things.
There's one.
And by no means, do we need an answer tonight. That is not, that's not the issue. It's just being able to put out there, show you basically what it's gonna cost per shift and kind of finagle what you feel is best for your needs.
Again, a little historical information. So our billing rate when I took office for patrol was
33.75 or
33.75.
or I thought it was 33. But
It might have been 31, but in any case.
Yep.
So our billing rate for patrol have been kept traditionally very, very low, because a lot of our patrol people were these per diem officers, like I was just talking about. So the average pay rate, so I'm going a little off the top of my head, but it's within pennies. Of those per diem officers for that 32.75 billing rate, they were being paid $20 an hour. You can go to McDonald's right now. and make more than that.
1950. Yeah,
Not 1950.
1950 was the last.
So you can go to McDonald's literally and make more than that. You can go to Taco Bell in West Lebanon, they're starting at 25. So when the average cost right now, this is gonna change January 1st. But long story short, for somebody right now, what we pay for a single person, if they were making $20, right, $20 an hour, we're paying them $20 an hour. It costs the department $32 an hour just for the bare minimum. That's not the vehicle, that's not the fuel, that's just the labor costs. That's an example.
Do you have access to sort of more detailed breakdown around seasonal or summer, winter breakdown, like does 3 hours in the summer tend to result in a lot more contacts or thing versus 3 hours in the winter?
A lot of that's gonna depend on what the weather is. Where, again, starting April, we're getting complaints. Main thing is getting the information when those complaints are happening, and we're gonna put pressure into the area. We're gonna make more stops, obviously, than what we would normally do in the middle of the winter, where a lot of times, I don't schedule shifts a lot of the times. And now, unfortunately, with only 18 shifts for the whole year, I gotta direct it more toward the summertime anyways. Would I say summertime would be a lot busier? Of course it is. Curtis Pond brings a lot of people into that area. One thing I did do is I evaluated the traffic stops and setting up, this report. We had few violations out on 14, but the most of them are on County Road.
Yeah.
County Road is 85–90% of the stops. And I can tell you, and you look at the report and I can go through some of it with you, what we call an SL3 violation, which is something 21 to 30 mile in excess of the speed limit, and that 25 zone. We are dealing with a fair amount of it, and that's the downfall. I'll word it the best way to word it is, we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg with a limited amount of shifts. When we out here once in a while, lucky we can catch them. Is that a deterrent? It's still a deterrent, but it's not the big deterrent effort of, okay, we're out here once a week, they don't know when we're gonna be out here. I'll just say that, and I understand it's money, I completely understand that. We wanna do what we can do to help, but it's just, a lot of them, we're seeing a lot of high speeds in all the towns. I don't know where it's coming from, but what we call SL3s, SL4s, which is 30+ mile in excess of the speed limit, we're seeing it all the time.
So, we've been having a lot of conversations about speed and traffic ordinance for several years now. It really kind of comes down to enforcement, and we're trying to use data to drive a lot of that. We now have invested in traffic science that track that data and have been doing traffic studies with the Regional Planning Commission. And so make sure that we're following a process for modifying any speed limits in a way that is measurable and behaviorally driven. I think we have noticed just anecdotally that, if you'll kind of afford me that, is that, the vast majority of the folks are traveling, around the speed limit. And without getting into all of the numbers, but we're getting better information about when the folks who are driving, kind of the minority of folks who are driving everybody's driving too fast observation are. And so I have a two-part question then, I guess. And the first one is, how much influence can we have on the scheduling as that data becomes available to us, and we can help make your time efficient and our impact greater?
I'm thinking that's what I'm just saying.
Yeah, I figured. We just had the same conversation with Roxbury.
Yeah, so. First of all, I want that data. Let me tell you what I do. I dealt with my own staff. I'll be open with you on this. Back, I don't remember how many years ago, in the town of Plainfield. And guys were saying nobody speed, nobody speed, nobody speed, no speeding. Well, they put out the tapes, which is what you're talking about, Regional Planning Commission. Got those tapes. We're able to literally go through them, because I literally go through the data, see when the speeds are happening, go and calculate when things are happening. If there's one person, I'll be open with, one person at midnight that's coming through at whatever speed, am I going to spend all your money to get that one person? Hypothetically, probably not. But if I got people coming through at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's 15 of them coming through at that time every single day, and say 50 and that 25 up here, that's when I wanna be there. Those are the people I want to deal with.
Yeah.
So I use that data to go through and do just that. And literally just did it with Roxbury. I proved to my guys by scheduling them based off of the issues, which we found speeds were around the noon time. And literally they did what we call LiDAR details in different locations where they'd set the tapes up and prove to them that these tapes don't lie, which worked out well. And I've been a firm believer in these tapes ever since. So a lot of cases, when I get a lot of speeding complaints, I'm gonna ask them to have them put out the tapes, and that's why.
Mhm.
So yes, if you have them, I would love them.
Well, so that's positive. The second part of that question then, related to staffing is, if we find a way to fund some, an increased level of enforcement, do you have the staffing to support the request for an increase in hours?
I think we're always hoping, that's the best way to word it.
So the next few months are gonna be a little challenging because our primary patrolman's going to the academy. So he's gonna be working shift, I'm gonna be working shift. So we're gonna be playing a little bit of catch up. But traditionally, we have a little wiggle room in our schedule, which now that the financial part, we used to make money doing other things than patrol. Now that the building is catching up on the patrol, in a perfect world, I would like to get away from doing all these other things and fund our department operations strictly on patrols with the town. So we are getting there. So we're able to put more of our staff time towards the town contracts. So I can't guarantee we can every day, we can hit every schedule the way everyone wants it. Life doesn't work that way. But yes, I think we have the flexibility to.
The main thing is that I'm gonna be able to schedule things accordingly. I don't want to put somebody out here at noon time if the speed is
Right.
happening at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's no use to you or to me. I'm here to help you. I'm not, it's not, he's the moneymaker, I'm not. I mean, that's the best way to word it. I wanna be able to be here when the problems are happening. I don't wanna be here when, be sitting out here, guy just sitting there playing on the computer, waiting for the next car to come through and never does. I wanna deal with the issues. So that's what we're here for. We're here for highway safety. We're not here to make a ton of money on tickets, but we're here to get people slowed down so we don't have fatalities or serious injury crashes. That's what our job is.
You want to speak to the ticket revenue in courts these days? That'd be worth it.
Okay. Yes, actually, new people. One thing I can tell you is people seem to think that every ticket, say a $200 ticket, we're gonna get back $200. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is anymore. In most cases, the hearing officers want you to strike up a deal. Back in 2016, legislature got to where there's big changes having to do with making different decisions on giving up to work with people on violations. Again, not soaking everybody on their money, et cetera, et cetera. And in a lot of cases, what we do is we work on violations with people. Whatever the case comes to be as far as what the dollar figure is, to a reasonable amount of money, so we don't have to have a hearing. I'll let you know that right from the get-go. Because for a lot of cases, if we're paying somebody to come in and do all the hearings, I'm putting money out there to pay them, you're paying for them, or we can settle the violations beforehand. I'll be open and upfront with you. In a lot of cases, even say vehicle not inspected, vehicle not registered, those type of things. A lot of times, if people get their vehicles registered or inspected, those violations never go to court anyways. Open and upfront there. We're not gonna go in here and state them a ton of money for something that the person's taking care of the violation. And that's just our view on that, working with the public and doing things to help them out as well. With that, when we go into court, like I said, they look for us to make deals. Some we do, some we do not. We open out front, depending on what the speed is over, et cetera. And depending on what the violation is, having to deal with that. If it's an erroneous violation, and somebody did something more than just speeding as well, it's gonna be a different situation. One thing I will say, in a lot of cases, you don't see a lot of arrest. There was absolutely no arrest, during the last, time period here. People who are running in excess of 30 miles in excess of the speed limit, basically is an accident operation, or what we call excessive speed. That is a criminal violation, where it could be assessed an accumulation of 15 points, depending on what the violation is. With their wonderful legislature, they decided that a lot of that stuff has to go diversion. So by the time they get done, they end up with no record.
No cost.
No cost, no, other than for the court fees, which is 147, I think now or something like that. So anyways, they end up walking out without a violation at all. We end up writing a speeding ticket for that. I'll be open with you. That's a whole different situation. We're gonna get a lot more out of it, only get the points. That's the other thing I'll let you know. If a person hasn't had a violation within the last 5 years, depending on what it is, and in the last 10 years, depending on what it is, we can ask the judicial bureau to waive person's points, as long as it is a 3-point violation or less. So the big violations where you're dealing with a 21 or 30 miles in excess of speed limit, you're looking at 5 points, you're looking at 8 points. They can waive those points. That's the way it is. There's no dealing with it there. So we're still hitting them with the points, so we're affecting them pretty serious on that end of things. But
Things are changing.
And do the court hours apply to our hours a week?
And generally how the bookkeeper has been doing it is 15 minutes per violation. So if say you got 4 during Calais, you're gonna get charged for an hour.
We try to make it as reasonable as possible. Sometimes you're sitting there on the line because court's backed up, big shocker, for a half hour, 45 minutes. And then other times it's 2 minutes. So we did the 15 minutes, it's reasonable and it's a good approximation. Without having to keep track by the minute of how long you're really there.
And I'll be open with a lot of them. Sometimes they don't get billed because we may have, say, 15 for Waitsfield. And you might have 2 or 3 in there. They're just, and they go through.
When you, Andrew, or me, it's just done on state.
Yeah, for us, it's done on state time.
That was a lot of information in a very short span, so.
And I think what would be helpful is if this could be put in our folders.
Yeah.
This information, they only give us 1 copy, and.
So if you pass it on down to Kari, we can scan it in the morning and email it to all of you.
Yeah, that'd be good.
What's the change in rate? Do you have, is that part of it?
Yes.
It's on here, it's
Yeah, that's,
from 60 to 66.
It's 60 to 66, and we're adding an additional 10 cents onto the federal mileage rate.
right.
So how many hours do we get?
It's 3 hours, it's one shift per week, and the shift is 3 hours, so.
I was just trying to figure out how much.
It's,
So our budget
200
last year was
something.
4,000.
Yeah, so it's, with the increases, I think in the report, it said that would bring it just north of 8,000, per.
Right, so, well, to continue the 4,000, we dropped from 18 shifts to 14 shifts a
Right.
year.
Right.
If we wanted 1 shift a week, it would go up to 12,000.
It could be anywhere in
Triple.
between, it could be more, it could be less. That was just to give you.
No,
kind of
I
a frame.
understand that, but without those numbers in front of me, I can't, no, I don't want to do it right now. That's
Yeah.
Take your time and
Yeah.
ask questions when the time comes.
And
Yeah.
you come up with a question after tonight, send it our way. More than happy to answer whatever you got for questions. We're just trying to come up with something, give you guys some ballpark figures to go with. And like I said, if there's, in the winter, all of a sudden you wanna drop down to 1 shift a month or something like that, we can work on that. More than pleased to do that.
So I'm getting a lot of calls from a lot of towns that we have contracts with. And you are no different. And state police used to be out there doing a lot of things. And we were always hired as additional, mainly for motor vehicle or some quality of life type stuff. State police on average are running 2 guys per shift for the entire barracks, which covers a huge area. So they're not out much at all anymore because they are just too darn busy. We are doing the best we can to help out the towns. And unfortunately, some of them are like, well, we want you here and we want you there. And it's a challenge.
Yeah.
So all the towns are strapped.
And quality of life issues, we in a lot of cases are dealing with
We're trying.
as, best we can, especially crashes, that type of thing. serious injury crashes or fatalities, that's state police work. They have a team that deals with that issues, but just a normal crash, slide off, that type of thing, if we're on patrol, we're gonna deal with it.
So, well, we had an issue last summer. We were very concerned about one of our citizens, and we called the state police, and they said, sorry, we can't help you. We were just concerned about this person's welfare and safety. Is that something we could have asked you to do?
Well, I actually believe I did.
Yeah.
I got a call
I
about,
think,
I think we did that, as well as I remember an issue involving a U-Haul that we dealt with,
yeah.
having to do park in a place with the
Mhm.
plow truck.
I didn't realize we could call them on.
So yes, just understand that, what I do is I schedule a 3-hour shift around that, and just understand where that goes with what you're scheduling.
Yes.
So that's the same if you get a call from the citizen, a resident
Mhm.
about an incident or, you know, there's a crash in East Montpelier Fire Department wants somebody there. That, you would respond to that and that comes out at the same time bank.
So I guess the best way to word that is, generally, not saying we aren't gonna respond, but generally what we do is we have a schedule that we work off of. If we're scheduled working in the area, then we'll probably go, but let me just take a next step on that is, if there's something going on, say in Calais, that needs first response, and we're in Woodbury, we're gonna go to Calais. If we're in Calais and something needs response in Woodbury, we're going. And just so you understand that, generally we go until the state police gets there. And then we hand it off to them, depending on what the circumstance is. A domestic burglary, those type of things, we may be a first responder. But I hate to say it, if you're looking at where you are dollar figure wise, if I got a burglary and I gotta run to St. Albans and deal with it and spend all day, the mileage, time, et cetera, warrants, figure out where I'm going, like, that's where dollar figures go fast. That's why we have an agreement with state police where what we handle and what we don't handle. And that's where we make it a little more feasible for you, dealing with quality of life issues. Do what we can, do it during the time that we're here, that way we're not going and spending out, taking the budget and just, I'd say, blowing it out.
If it's non-emergent, reach out to the captain. If it's something that can be dealt with, you know, not immediately. In the next shift, we deal with it or beforehand.
I dealt with one this morning for Roxbury by phone call, went through the phone call and getting actually a hold of the warden, had to deal with a cruelty to animal issue that figured out that the warden actually had dealt with it beforehand, but we worked together on those type of situations.
We're trying to be as responsive as we can within the framework we have, so we're all here to help, that's for darn sure.
Does anybody else have, any other questions?
Just
Oh, yeah.
remind us when the contract gets finalized? What time of year do we do that?
Without it right in front of me, I'm terrible
We
with,
set for this one,
yeah,
it's July 1st to June 30.
okay, because some are on different cycles than others, so I will defer to your knowledge.
Yes.
Okay, so then we would be signing that in May or June or something like that?
Whenever you determine your budget.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Okay.
Which one's the January?
January is more done.
Okay, so there.
Yeah.
We have-
Better probably than it'll
Both
last for
columns
the fiscal year, it makes it a lot less confusing.
We're trying to get all on the same page for everything,
Yeah.
it's just easier to, can be a lot.
Well, thank you. And obviously, thank you for the service. And we appreciate the help and cooperation and collaboration and trying to deal with our, I think we're fortunate as a community at the moment, you know, most of our concerns are around traffic and ordinance enforcement. But, you know, I've attended a couple of gatherings and the law enforcement challenges in the rural communities is escalating very quickly. And you know, right now, I think we're not seeing that trend and we'll try to hold on to that for as long as we can. But we do appreciate the service. Thanks a lot. And we'll work these in here. We've got other conversations to kind of sort out through.
Yeah, and Jordan, I guess someone would want to follow up on the traffic data question and our ability to share that with the.
That would be
Yeah, it's our data and it's anonymous, so, I don't think we have any legal issue with sharing that data as we need to use it. And, you know, I think that, as long as we can get our hands on it, for lack of better terms, deputizing, Kari to share that and find, you know, when would be the most efficient time, you know, I think.
Like, for example, the exercise we just went
Just
through
went
on
through.
Lightning Ridge,
Yeah.
right? And now the ordinance doesn't go into effect.
Let's
So, like, looking at those numbers to when
Yeah.
people are going to, would be a helpful thing.
Yeah, and I think as soon as we kind of get a better idea of like how easy it is to get that data and how regularly we want to be checking it, you know, I think. Now it'd be interesting to take, I guess, a closer look at what the incident rates are and when, but you know, I think a lot of that patrolling and traffic enforcement stuff is gonna be around school calendar years and like late summer into fall and then end of year when you have traffic and you know, certainly the Maple Corner, Curtis Pond activity in the summer. It doesn't seem like it matters really on the county road, the traffic patterns or the traffic patterns, but you know, the Lightning Ridges and others that are maybe seeing a shift in traffic patterns that are a little more seasonal relative to school traffic schedules. Anyway, so good to know that we can collaborate on that, and we're trying to put in signage that makes that a lot more
One thing I will ask,
efficient.
that's best for me is one person. So somebody, whoever wishes to be that contact person to deal with the complaints that are coming in, so I don't get, hate to say, I don't get barraged by a bunch of calls and end up getting 10 different information. I get information from one person, makes it a whole lot easier. We generally do that with all the towns. It works very well. Basically I get the complaint and we go from there and schedule accordingly. So it makes it a little easier.
So one beautiful thing about a sheriff's office, and hearing what you were talking about with, oh, did you check with the union? With your prior discussion, if sheriff's departments are not unionized, nor can they be per statute. That is a very huge an advantage compared to a PD or the state police, because we can flex people's schedules. And our patrolmen are very good about doing that, especially Davis, our young one. He prefers to have a varying schedule. He has very serious ADHD and he'll tell you about that, so it's all good. But we don't have those constraints about, oh, this is my shift, you can't move me. Well, we can flex our staff however we like and they're okay with that. So it's very good for the towns to have that going. It's one of the few advantages we have.
Thank you. Thanks for making the trip out. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Thank
you.
My email address is on there, cell phone, everything is on there.
Try not to abuse it.
Pretty soon we'll have it.
Is this the get, wait, is this the get out of jail one or is it?
Thank you. So this is the report.
Yeah.
Is it like where we're gonna go? I mean,
Yeah, we did that.
7.
Yeah.
20.
Yeah.
Barbara, yes.
Yes, so last year when they were here and they asked for that one person be appointed as the communications liaison with them, you guys appointed me. I don't know if you want to reconsider that, if you want to make it be Kari or somebody else, or if you want to take action on their request.
I'm happy to do it. I've had reason to call them anyway.
Right.
certainly as road commissioner, it makes sense, as long as you're
Yeah.
road commissioner, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. We can make that appointment now if if everybody's comfortable with revisiting that delegation of duties, but I'm also comfortable waiting until we have a contract to look at and just doing it all in one fell swoop. Does anybody have a preference? It doesn't seem, how often are you reaching out to them?
Nobody's ever asked me to do that. So when this call went to them this last year,
Yeah,
and when it didn't go through me. So we can wait and put it on an agenda so we can warn it first if you want to.
Sure, let's just, wait, I think, as we put it onto have a budget conversation, about it, and we'll just warn a decision about it. That makes sense. Thanks for bringing that up,
Do
Barbara.
you have a sense of what we should put in next year's budget for sheriff's patrol?
Well, that's why I wanted to kind of play
Sure.
with that worksheet a little bit.
Okay, so we'll just talk about it in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
That makes
that's
sense.
all right with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you could put in $6,000 just as in between, the 4 and the 8, if we were to.
I'll
keep
plug that
things-
in and
Yeah,
see,
and then
we'll see what happens.
So we had we're still running on time, and we've got the draft highway department budget or worksheet to review.
Yeah.
How do you want to move to that?
So I can introduce that. So, went through this in detail with Toby, and Toby's with us tonight. And also, with John and Tyler again, it was the second time through with everybody. And then Toby created this, summary of expense categories. If you saw that in the folder, that's very helpful. I had done that for materials, but this does it for all of the expense categories in the highway department. And it gives you a sense, going back to 2020, it gives you a sense of how things vary over time, and it helped us identify what's really the biggest opportunity for savings here, which is what is in this draft is, rather than 5 full-time people, we have 4 full-time, plus 1 20 an hour a week person, and $9,000 allocation for mowing. And so we think that's sufficient. It's more realistic. And it saves on benefits, right? Just one less full-timer. Yeah, so that's where you see the main savings in here. All the other categories, I have to say, I think are probably within a reasonable range. We can talk about anything you want in specific, but sort of hard pressed to see where there's a lot of savings to be had. And this budget is driven by personnel, mainly the medical, and the equipment payments. And really the one option on the equipment side would be to draw on our highway capital fund. Which, part of me is reluctant to do that. On the other hand, it's there for a reason. And if if we wanted to find a way to further reduce this budget, we could have a plan to draw on that somewhat. There's 162,000 in there currently, so it's pretty healthy.
you say you've increased the ones that we've gone over on, like gravel, sand, salt. Do you feel like you've got some good realistic numbers in there now?
I think so. I mean, we don't have as much for gravel as we spent last year, but last year was really an anomaly. If you look back, I didn't include the detail of the materials. But if you look, the figure that we have in there is pretty good if you look at all the other years. We're a little low on chloride if you compared it to this year that we're in currently, but that also seems to be an unusual thing. And, John and I have talked about, we're just gonna have to spend less on chloride. This draft doesn't reflect, the changed MVP. And so that will decrease it about 10,000, bring it down to 13%.
Well, I'm glad to see that, we're working, some of the things that we've tried to squeeze down a little bit, back into, closer to what our actual use is gonna be, and gravel is getting the increase, and, the material essentially is getting the increase. The road salt is interesting. and this may not be as applicable, I guess, to this year's budget, but considering how little pavement we have, I wonder whether or not we could work with another road department who maybe has a higher volume of paved road surfaces
No,
to have,
East Montpelier,
to basically contract them to treat
an interesting idea.
our paved surfaces.
No, they helped us out during one storm last year, just as a favor, but, would they be open to that? They're already going down County Road, right?
Right.
Actually, that stretch of County Road is a lot closer to their garage than ours.
It is.
So I mean, we'd still need to pave it and it's obviously, or plow it, and it's generally getting salted while it's being plowed. It's the same truck doing the work, but if they're coordinated in doing that, it seems like that could be an opportunity for us, maybe.
Yeah,
It seems like we'd have a really hard time, we would suffer from, we suffer from we always suffer from an economy of scale issue, but salts are a really acute challenge. Because it requires storage and going and getting it and everything else. And we're probably not consuming nearly as much as some of the other municipalities in the area that have more paved road surfaces.
Yeah, we'd still have the issue on Marshfield Road, but that's the other side of town too.
yeah, the other pavement is Marshfield, that little stretch of Lightning Ridge and that little piece of Moscow Woods, that's all on the east side. And I agree, it's something that's logical. If you were designing this from scratch, you would definitely look at something like that. I'm trying to think about how that would affect our staffing, right? Because usually one of the drivers is doing the 1 ton with the plow and salt on the pavement.
And does a load of salt do the back and forth? Like, are they having to go reload salt midway through routes, or are they?
No, I don't
No.
think so, because they're only doing that
'Cause it's
3 mile
just that
stretch.
one.
Anyway, it's something to explore.
Yeah. And in culverts, it seems like we can't really help anything with the culverts, but it's interesting now that we've had 2 years, 2 years of flooding, and the amount of culvert replacing that we did. Are most of the culverts that get replaced, are they being funded by or being reimbursed by
So
FEMA?
any FEMA expense should not be in here.
Right.
It's a separate fund. What is in here, or what's not reflected in the budget anyway, is grant and aid work that could involve a fair amount of culvert. That's true this year. Toby made the point today, he's applying for reimbursement for this year's grant and aid. So we're expecting an additional $59,000 in reimbursement later this fiscal year that we didn't budget for. So that, that's another consideration in terms of the highway capital equipment fund, because any overage, any savings that we have in our highway fund automatically gets turned over to the highway equipment fund. That's something that the town approved, the voters approved at the town meeting. So that, just keep that in mind if we wanted to draw on the highway capital equipment fund next year. There's a good chance that there'll be extra money in there from this year.
From reimbursement from the state.
Yeah, there's $59,000 of unbudgeted revenue.
Okay.
So next to the bridges and culverts, though, we had a pretty, the $8,500 in the 24 budget, and then the actual was 29,000. Is that because those culvert expenses got budgeted or got posted to that cost center, and then we got reimbursed for it?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. I know we stockpiled a bunch of culverts. Because we anticipated a shortage last year, so we bought more than we needed, even for our FEMA purposes.
Fun thing to say.
And I learned recently that Ann Tulin sourced culverts from Quebec,
Oh my
was
God.
able to find them when others couldn't.
Mhm.
But I think that's part of what's going on there. We've been drawing down on that inventory.
So does that mean that we can further draw down that line item for next year?
I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
not sure about that.
So the road commissioner will go on this budget.
Right, that's not reflected in here either. But that'll be neutral from an overall perspective. Maybe a little savings.
So if we were gonna utilize some of the highway capital reserve fund, that would be offsetting some of the payments on existing.
Yeah, the
jobs
capital
and stuff.
expenses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Toby, he suggested that you could either pay off something like the mower that's,
Mhm.
sort of a lower cost thing over the next, I think we have 4 years of payments left. Or you could just assume that we're gonna make any one of these or two of these payments from the capital reserve fund, and that would bring down the budget overall.
Seems like it would save more money long-term to pay off one of the loans so that we're not carrying the interest.
Right. Yeah, you want me to look at that and bring it to you? I mean, if we were gonna do, I think the mower is the obvious one, because I think it was 4 more years of $16,000 payments. It's the most affordable
Yeah,
of the capital items.
yeah, I mean,
So one thing to look at is the capital plan. So normally what you would look at is carrying just a fixed number every year, like 100,000. So essentially you need to look a little bit further down the road to see what is coming up, because you might have 5 or 6 payments in 1 year that's really going to boost your problem. And what you want to try and do is look over the longer period of time and try and balance it so that you're averaging about 100,000 a year. And you can, if you have one bad year, you can take some money out of the capital reserve, the highway capital, and just cover that one overage in a year. And that way your tax base stays pretty consistent over the years.
So yeah, we'll look at that and share with you the capital plan again, and we can make a decision about that next time.
that sounds good. Do you need any feedback on any of the other items, Corey? Before we move on to the
Only if you want.
only. Does anybody else want to spend any more time with this? Otherwise, I think we should probably move on, try to stay on schedule. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Kari, and Toby as well. It looks like we have some additions to Zoom. Larry Bush seems very obvious. John?
John McCullough.
Oh, it's a John. Okay, great. So moving on to the calendar and next steps for budgeting. You want to spend some time talking about that, Kari?
Yeah, just a preview. So next meeting, we have both fire departments coming in.
Yep.
We're gonna go through the rest of the budget, operating budget in detail. And then we're not anticipating social services, because that committee will meet after. So we'll deal with that in the second meeting in December. But we're getting down to it. We of course scheduled that extra meeting in December, so. But
And that's gonna be a dedicated meeting to go over just budget. It's
Just
gonna be
budget.
the full.
Unless Jared
review.
needs some time from us. But yeah, try to clear the decks and focus on budget.
Okay. Great, thank you. Well, with that, We'll invite Jared up and have a town plan conversation.
Yeah, let's have a town plan conversation. All right, so I'm sure you're all now aware of what we learned this week.
Hmm.
So the long story is that we were told and we were under the impression that the town plan expired at the end of the year, so next month. In reality, which we did not know, the town plan expired February 1st of 2024. So
And Jared, that's simply because it was adopted.
Apparently,
February 1st,
yes.
8 years prior.
Correct.
And we just,
it was never, yeah, and I've even learned this week that, when the town regs conversation was happening with Central Vermont Regional Planning, there wasn't even any discussion that you need to do this before this. It was just a discussion. So this expiring of the town plan has two implications. One is grant funding, for certain municipal grants. It doesn't sound like any that are critical, but certain grants we are not able to as a town apply for until there is a new, in effect, town plan. I've done some calling to CVRPC this week. Kari has talked to some people, and it doesn't look like any critical grants, things that like is necessary, but there are grants that we cannot apply for until the town plan is in effect.
But Jared?
Yeah.
Couldn't we just tonight re-adopt the old town plan?
From what I understand, no. I've asked.
There are required updates that need to be made.
Correct.
Oh.
Yes, that was my thought as well. My first question to CVRPC was, couldn't we just say the 2016 town plan stays in effect? And that doesn't seem to be an option.
It is actually in effect, right? It is our plan currently.
There is no plan.
There's no plan.
Yeah. It's expired. There is no plan. That was my first question, was couldn't we just simply say that one is in effect? And that's not an option. So the other implication that it has is the zoning regulation changes that were voted on at town meeting. Because the town plan expired before town meeting. And because state statute says that if you have an expired town plan, you are not allowed to amend bylaws, zoning regulations, etc. And so because that plan expired before that town meeting, that zoning regulation change does not
We have
happen.
no shoreline zoning after, well, we.
Right, so
Back to the old.
the old zoning is in effect.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what's in effect. Just any of those updates and changes are not in effect until we get a new town plan. The part that gets me on this is the amount of time it takes to approve a new town plan.
Mhm.
It takes a while. So I've sent it to Kari, I sent it to you late, I sent it to you, that's what I was.
Yeah,
doing
you
my
wanna share it
homework
now?
on. Yeah,
Can you share screen?
I can do that.
I can do it.
Yeah, if you wanna share it. The second one I sent you, maybe in the email, might be easier to understand, but I'm not in the Zoom.
we did have one in our folder, right? The amendment process.
This is specific.
Well, there's the amendment process and how that works. And then there is what we feel like we can do in terms of the time within that CVRPC guideline. So our last meeting, we found all of this out, was this week, so the 19th. If you see this, so we've got two meetings coming up. We've got the 3rd and the 17th. And then if you scroll down, sorry, a little bit back up, sorry. So our goal was to finalize the plan at the January 7th meeting. If we did that, we have the series of events that then has to happen in order for this town plan to be approved. So if we finalize it on the 7th, by the 10th, we have to submit that then to all of our adjacent towns, the CVRPC, the department at the state, and all these other public, all these places that we have to do that. And that has to be done 30 days before we can have a meeting. So there has to be 30 days in between us finalizing the plan and then sending it out before we can even then meet again to talk about it. So we would then, on February 4th, if you scroll up, sorry, all right, by February 4th, we would then meet our last time before the public hearing. We have to warn then that public hearing by the end of January to have the public meeting at the beginning of February.
And that's assuming that there are comments or not, that things you can deal with at that meeting.
Correct.
So
If it's bigger than that, no, it would push this out. Yes, that is all, this is all if everything is perfect. Yes.
Or close to.
Or close to perfect. So we would then have our public hearing on the plan on the 11th of February. If you scroll just a little bit more, then by the end of February, on the 28th, is when you, as select board, would have to warn for your meeting, which has to have 30 days notice. So then you can't have that meeting for then another month, or another 30 days. Which would put it at the April 14th select board meeting before you can vote to then approve that plan. So with everything perfect, we can't get there until April. I also say with everything perfect because I'm not gonna say that this is our exact course that we would want to take. But we have everything done in terms of our discussions. There's some, making it, as I say, prettified, right? Like making it look good and formatted and everything. But the natural resources section, that section, and I know Larry's there, the section is very detailed, very good, but we do feel like it is going to take more time to do that right than we have to do. So a suggestion we have is to move forward with all new sections of the town plan, except for the natural resources. To approve the old natural resources, the 2016 one, with any statutory changes that needed to happen, because there are a few things that change in statute that then says has to be in a natural resources section. To move forward with that so that we can get a town plan approved and kind of do a two-pronged approach that then while it goes through the process of being the 30 days waiting period to time, we can then be working with Conservation Commission, like to finalize that section. I don't think that that allows us to just insert that section. But I think what it allows us to do is to approve the town plan and then just do the amendment process once it's approved, to then put that section then in there. What we're afraid of, especially now, is that it would take us even longer to do that.
Yeah.
Right, and we can't afford necessarily to wait much longer. Now, the question we have asked too, and I don't know, Kari, if you feel like you've gotten a good answer or not, but it was, once we get the town plan, how do we go about then approving those regulations? The question I've asked is, can select board just ratify the town vote from March of 24? Like, is there a
Yeah, so we can, and
Okay.
that's within the scope of, the
I
reason
figured.
that this last one went to, town meeting and vote was because it was a substantial,
Correct.
change, and felt that that was, appropriate, we as a, it's within the, authority and purview of the select board to make
that
changes, and we've kind of created like this informal line that
Right.
seems to exist. It's substantial.
Right.
Let's allow the
The town
community
vote,
to
vote.
the express will through vote, and if we had to make, smaller changes, and
But I feel like if we're approving a document that the voters approved last year, I would feel more comfortable doing that as a select board, knowing that
Knowing
the
that-
voters approved it once,
Right,
then I certainly would doing it without having that.
yes.
So,
Right. So in that case, if we can get this done, that then allows that the moment it is in effect, right, select board can then simply ratify, and that's just the term I'm using.
it's not, right, it's not.
But approve
We'd be
them.
adopting the zoning ordinances.
Well, and I imagine we'd have to go through the sort of
Regular
process
process.
again.
Yeah, it would have to be a
We
regular
still have
process, right?
Regular process.
The,
Right,
the warnings and the hearings
Right.
and.
yeah, so we feel like we can do this if we do that sort of the natural resource, like, it is a big, important section, and we just don't feel like we've been able to give it the time yet that we need to give it, but we also can't wait necessarily.
What if instead, we just went through the process and readopted the old town plan?
Right.
So that we
You could.
could get the zoning going, what would would that timeline look like? We could
This-
start-
It would be the same.
It's the
No.
same.
No, because we wouldn't have to wait for you.
No, but that's still this plan, like, we could maybe bump it up 2
But-
weeks,
This 2 weeks, yeah.
right? But like, it's this is still what's necessary, regardless of what that town plan
Back to the
is.
top of it, please. Thank you. I know.
Yeah, so,
Because really, we're slammed.
Right.
There's no.
yeah, like, that's us, I mean, again, we could move it up to maybe, I mean, you can move it into December, I guess.
When we start with land submitted to adjacent towns, we've got the plan, we don't have to do those.
Well, the problem is there have been several statutory changes that we then will have to go in and make sure exist in that plan. So we've got to take the old one and find every place where statute has changed in the last 8 years that then required to be in the plan. So we're still gonna have to edit. I mean, I get your point, like, if best case would have just been that plan is still in effect.
Yeah,
Allow us to do that and we'll just go through the process, but it doesn't feel like that's
okay.
possible.
So,
Jared, this is actually skipping the Regional Planning Commission's initial review, right? Don't they offer that?
Correct, so, CBRPC also says what we should do, not have to do, but should do, is to give them the plan and
Draft.
give them the draft and give them 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks to make sure everything's in it and then start this. This is without that.
Can we send it to them now?
Yeah, we could. It's still very rough, but we could, yes. Which might be, I mean,
I'd almost recommend that.
yeah, that might be,
Avoid the
the
worst case of having to start
that's
over.
still putting us on this, but at least giving us some feeling that at least
If that's not, if
they've looked at it.
that's not mandatory, but it still gives them time to come back and
Correct.
say, oh, you forgot this. or-
We could do that, yeah. We could do that.
What happens if they say not approved?
Regional Planning Commission?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to continue to edit to make sure all of that is in it. And once we start this process, we can still do that before every public meeting. But then at that public meeting, all of those changes have to be then presented. So yes, that can't act like if they come back and go, here are 15 things that you were missing in it. Because they do have a checklist that I now have a copy of. They have a checklist, but it is 13 pages of just the checklist. That is required in it. If they say, here's 10 that you don't have, we can then edit and put that in there, but that's not a, next day thing either. And again, what I think we're trying to find is how do we limit our time?
Right.
So that we can, it's the zoning regulations. We're trying to, and after all of this time doing a town plan, we want to make this right too. I don't want to push something through
Right.
that isn't what we want it to be either. But
Is the town plan historically in Calais adopted by the select board or at town meeting by the voters like zoning? Does anybody know?
I think it's mostly select board.
Just,
I don't know of any time at town plan or a town meeting.
okay.
from what I've just gone through a ton of this, I don't know of any time it's ever been, at least recently.
So have you guys talked about how bad this is, in terms of zoning? This is I mean, it seems to me that's the worst thing.
Correct.
Like, we're back to the old zoning.
Correct.
How bad is it?
I mean, John, this is where I go to
Yeah,
John
you need-
McCullough all the
Sure,
time,
because
right?
John's I mean, if we lose all the shoreland zoning,
Right,
we lose all the stuff we did, if John's listening, is he?
yeah,
still there?
John,
We're gonna lose the whole thing where we changed the process with the DRB, DAB.
No, it's not as, it's not like suddenly everything falls apart. There's the State Shoreline Protection Act. And
Right.
a lot of the shoreland stuff that we did was just simply making our regs align with State Shoreline Protection Act. In fact, in many ways, the old zoning regs were a little more restrictive. No development was allowed within 150 feet of the water, whereas the new regs, it was changed to 100 feet. The change was the old regs had a 50-foot vegetative buffer. The proposed new regs had 100-foot, but that 100-foot buffer is protected by State Shoreline Protection Act. So we're not in bad shape. The one thing that disappears completely is the river corridor overlay. We've got language that says no development is allowed in the river corridor, and now we don't have a zoned river corridor district.
And is that gonna affect, grants that we can get? And maybe FEMA protections? Or flood insurance?
I can find out from Vicky Arthur on the commission, because she's a FEMA flood. That's what she does, so I could ask her that question to find out for
I mean,
sure.
I'm stuck with it anyway, but I guess we should know.
No, I mean, I guess we just have to go on, it's just what they were, right? And so if that was, if that wasn't a problem before, at least it's not a problem now. Right, but yeah, river corridor is that change too, but
Does it impact individual projects or permit applications or approvals that have happened over the last year?
That's a good question.
It is.
They posed to our, a VLCT attorney. They said they'd have to sit with the specifics. But in general, they didn't think it would be a problem because there would have had to have been an appeal of the decisions and, I think the only one that was in the river corridor that would have been impacted was the town's application for the stormwater projects. And who would appeal that? It would be, all three were favorable decisions, so it would have to be neighbors. And in this case, the neighbors were supportive, they are supportive of this project. And if.
Or the town appealing, a non-approval or something, but
right.
again.
Right, but they were all favorable.
Yeah, right.
They were all favorable. So it seems unlikely that the three decisions so far would be impacted by this.
Yeah, I think the major issue is just that from the point we find out going forward, we're in holding.
Right.
Like that's the biggest part of this, is just from here going forward, we're in hold, at least it's going to be December and January
building
and
season.
February, right? Like at least in that, trying to put the positive spin on it, at least it's then. But I think it's just more that we're now in a holding pattern until we can get this done.
We should add to your calendar the time requirements for passing the zoning regs. We should just
Okay.
extrapolate that out a little bit.
We can do
and map that.
I could pull that calendar up that we were looking at. I could go through and then here's where then how we do that. I could talk to Kari about, like, we could figure out.
We think we can literally have the select board re-adopt them.
Right.
After the town plan goes into effect.
As long as you do a
It'd be
hearing.
good to really double check that.
Well, yeah, we
Yeah.
may need to go through the normal process.
Do a hearing. That's
But we
Right,
might
they have to at least warn a meeting and do, right,
We might.
But-
just to
Yeah.
make sure.
But they might be able to happen concurrently. right? We might be able to have the hearing
And then,
30 days before our adoption, around the same time as. the
right, we
hearing
could,
on the plan.
yeah, like I wonder if it's in tandem, two different processes going on,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
One to do the town plan and one to do
Right.
the readoption
Yeah.
or adoption. Yes.
Right.
I believe John had his hand up.
John, you're on mute.
There's no reason that the public hearings, et cetera, that go along with the zoning regs couldn't happen at the same time that we're dealing with the town plan stuff.
Yeah, I agree. We could just make them slash zoning, whatever we want to call that. But yeah, I think they could happen at the same time. Walk and chew gum, right?
Yeah.
Well, and they should be consistent, so.
Right.
I have a question. Does the zoning regs have to be approved by the voters?
Mm-mm.
No.
No, they don't. I won't even say technically, it is fully within the select board's purview to adopt zoning regulations and amendments to the zoning. The reason that we, as a board, you know, kind of adopted that process and kind of agreed to doing that last time because it was such a significant change that it felt like it warranted going to a town meeting vote. Because the last one was pretty substantial, and there was a lot of different sections that were getting changed, so.
Well, and historically in Calais,
It's always been.
it's
the
been,
town vote.
It's been that,
yeah, it's sort of carrying
Yeah.
on the tradition.
But I didn't know if that was a little wrinkle in there.
No, and I don't think that there haven't been change, you know, like, it's just, and that's why I use the word ratify, even though that might not be the term to officially use. It's just the select board going, we're okay with that, and that was great, thank you for approving that. Right, a year later, like, that's what it is, right? I will say, I think something that's come out of this is a much longer process than I will venture to say one should be for this. But two, something that going forward, we talked about this at our last meeting, that it's 8 years from now when this happens again, and if we're smart, we would go 2 years before it's over, right, before it expired, which is 6 years. So the chances that any of us are even still on planning, just because people move.
Yeah.
We have to have a way that then when this date is, that this is 2 years before, right? I don't know what it is, I mean,
Well, Chris had a great suggestion on the way.
What was that?
Well, no, this is just regarding the expiration date,
Yeah.
just stamp on the front of the plan.
we talked about that. We're going to put another page, whether it's required or not, there's going to be a cover page
Yeah.
within it.
Right.
You know, here, that, from 2 years, you know, spell out when it's supposed to happen,
Exactly.
for sure.
I've prepared a draft 2025 select board calendar, and you will notice in that calendar that I have a spring and a fall check-in on how is the new town plan working. So if you do that every 2 times a year,
Yeah. Yeah.
for the next 6 years leading up to 2 years prior to the 80-year mark, you'll really be on schedule.
Well, what we noticed, and if you take a copy of the 2016 plan, it says 2016. And then on every page on the bottom, it just has the date of 2/1.
Yeah.
16.
It does.
It doesn't say 24, it says 2/1/16.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the plan does it say expires. So we thought if on the cover page, it even says that, not expiration date, because that's.
Valid.
Yeah,
from here.
valid
Through.
from here to here, right, so that
Right.
it is it's even in hard copy, that it's right there.
Yeah.
And it's clear, I've also learned we are not the first town this has happened to. That does make me feel good, it also makes me question all of the difficulty of the entire process,
Yeah.
right, but that's not our fight, that's not. But it is nice to learn that we're not the only ones that. You know, for some reason, they think it's that year, and then it's not. I know there was also some because of the amendment to a town plan in 21. There was an amendment to it in 21, and then there was some thought that maybe that kind of kicked off a new club, it didn't, like, that's not a thing. And so, because that was the first thing that I asked, well, if it was amended in 21, does it become a new? No, that's not the case. So, it has to be with a brand new plan the whole time. So,
Is there an obligation to? Is there an obligation to go, is the process different for the amendment and the? It's the
it's the
same.
same thing. It's this exact.
So, it kind of started creeping into the conversation late into our review of these different sections and our existential wrestling with all of this. That if you read through the regional plannings, this is why you need to go through these processes and when and et cetera, like the intent of it becomes a more burdensome process the more robust the plan is. And so we haven't seen like a fully modified version of the town plan yet. And are we as close as we want to be to simplifying the town plan so that it makes this process easier? And I get what I'm getting, like working towards is punishing the planning commission with town plan purgatory and say, do we work with regional planning to readopt, even though we still have to, it's probably not going to go through, and it's not going to be any shorter, but like try to get the changes and statutory changes in to the old town plan that we need to get it readopted and then immediately go into trying to refine it even further. If there are still outstanding, if there is still an substantial outstanding section that that needs editing and review, and it's still going to have to go through that same process again.
Right.
Do we just buy ourselves more time to make a more to do the whole thing and continue to refine it?
It's also 6 of one, half dozen of the other. When we go to amend it, it's still the same process, so we could do that whole, you could go through it again. Right, whatever is adopted in April could be, if you're gonna have to do it again to get natural resources then in, we could be doing we don't have to just do that one section. We can amend the whole thing.
So my concern is like this is a best case scenario. And there are so many substantive changes that there's a non-zero chance that like there's request and requirement, or there's community input that has not been realized quite yet. And we have a laborious process that gets delayed and kicked down. And but if and I know this isn't an unsubstantial amount of work, but if we can make modifications to the existing town plan that makes it easier to work through that process with a little bit more confidence, saying like, we need to just get on track so that we can readopt the zoning regulations. And here are the modifications that we're going to be making to the old town plan so that we're in statutory compliance, so that folks feel a little more comfortable, maybe about in parallel doing the regulations and the readoption at the same time, so that we don't run into too many hurdles, I guess. And then start immediately after that, continuing to refine the new town plan and adopting that.
I mean, we theoretically could ask CVRPC and send them 2.
Oh, no.
One, the 2016 plan, and just say you're only looking to make sure that everything is statutorily up to date. And just give us that back with what updates need to have, while then on a longer process, looking at the one that we have. Then returning the one to us and going, just add these 10 things, right, I'm making that up, but just add these 10 things, we could then just add those 10 things and then move that along. I mean, we theoretically could do that.
Jared, how do you think your planning commission will feel about doing that?
What I just suggested.
Yeah.
Well, you got one of them there, and John.
I don't think any of this needs to be decided tonight.
No.
I think, Jared, maybe take these thoughts
Suggestion.
back
We have a meeting next week.
and
so-
say, have a conversation about what would it look like? How would people feel? The select board wants to honor all the work that's been done.
Yeah.
Well, right.
It's also interested in a streamlined plan.
I'm interested in streamlining the whole thing.
And just maybe feel that out, and then that,
Right.
that decision can be made later.
And not just streamlining this one, but like really like streamlining the future ones too. And so that it's not such a,
Well, the whole other thing on the table, which is all future, not now. You can pay CVRPC to basically come to your meetings, and we give them the things that we want to be in it, and they write it. It's not an insubstantial amount of money to do that. But if it's going to be hard for volunteers to get together to do this in a fast way, it might be worth in the future talking about.
Well, actually, when I was on the planning commission, we got a grant.
You do, yes, and you can get
We
grants to do that,
Yeah, Bird Rock,
Yeah.
Westfield, Waitsfield, and they,
and they will come in and they
They
will just
were
do that for you, yeah.
and they set out the structure that you guys are now working with.
Yeah, so instead of us reinventing the wheel on our own, trying to figure it out, somebody figures it out for you, and you just make sure that what the town wants it to say.
Yeah,
Is
so
what the
there are
town wants
monies
it to say.
available for that.
Yeah, so, but I will take that back to planning commission and see that, is it possible to find a way to streamline this by doing both things, by approving the 2016 plan with just the changes, so that it can move forward, and then continue to push through on the one, so that it's then exactly what we want. Without having to amend and do all of that, we would just completely replace.
and I guess my pitch to that is that, there's still editing and work and dialogue to be had, and it sounded like almost every one of the segments that we looked at, there was continued, there's existential changes that continue to be kind of
No, most
discussed,
of them,
but like,
most of them are to a point where they're just being put together
Okay.
as one document.
so I'll take that back.
But
We're
no,
still
but
gonna have to
just
go
to your
through
point.
we're still gonna have to go through the zoning reg process
Correct.
too. And,
Correct.
and that's gonna be a scope of work that
Correct.
can't be separated, and that best can be put through in parallel.
Correct, which is, now that I think does need to be done. I think that has to be done in parallel, so that there could be one meeting where the town plan is approved and all the public hearings have happened on zoning, and it just happens. Like that, I think, is the way that has to happen, to make sure that, but what you're suggesting, Jordan, is trying to find a way to get this as quickly as possible, while also not having to push through it so fast.
Well, that's the thing, I
That
think.
it's not the plan that we want.
I think that I'm just thinking about, like, I guess the optics from the residents' perspective. There's this pretty substantial situation. We have to go through a process of
Right.
like re-ratifying town regulations, and that seems like a lot for anybody to feel like they can chew on if they're supposed to be participating on substantial changes to a town plan, while they're also, hosting, or supposed to be entertaining hearings about regulations and what's happening here, just for keeping track of things. But if you're saying that, this is our situation and we have to re-ratify the town regs, here is how we are updating our previous town plan to be in statutory compliance. And we have an immediate plan to continue to update the town.
Right, well,
town plan.
to that point too, I think what we have to do is we have to figure out what is the path forward that will make our neighbors feel like they understand the process.
Mhm.
Like, I also don't want people to think that then that is just the opening up of the zoning regulations conversation again. Like, oh, we're just gonna open this up and now this is just time for me to go change it. Like, that's not necessarily what it will be. But it could be seen as that too. Like, we have to be very careful of the way we do that. So we do have to be, I mean, we've been really open and out there about people, commenting, and here's all the information, and, but you're right, we have that, it's a lot to digest. So we also have to make it known too, that the zoning regulations part is not, it's not necessarily an open conversation about the regulations. It's just us going through the process of, here's how you now approve those.
Well, it's not bad, but but it's a lot to chew on, and I
It
guess
is.
from from a resident standpoint, I could see where that seems like a lot of log jamming of new content to digest. And I just get that, we're invited, the hearings are there for a reason, and if we're trying to expedite a timeline or having conversations around expediting timelines, it would feel better personally,
Right.
I guess. If it didn't seem like people needed to digest quite so much information all at once. If we already have a plan to add another segment to the town plan in the not too distant future to get the natural resources included in there as
Right.
well. I mean,
Right.
it's gonna have to go through that same process anyway.
No, I don't disagree with that. I think finding a way where we don't have to do that is preferable. Right, I think finding a way to do that, which sounds like could be a possibility, is what you're saying. Not to say, let's do this plan and then come back and amend it just to get this part back in. That's more to digest, I think, than the parallel plan regs. I do agree with that. Like, I think that's convoluted. So finding a way to make sure that it's like, yes, we're talking about these two things, but it's only these two things. Right, yes, they're two big things, but we're also not proposing any changes to zoning. Like, there's nothing for us to say, here's what's new with it. It's what you've already seen. It's what is already there. Like, yes, if somebody has something they can bring, but that's not what we're doing. It's just, here's what you've already, read and approved. But I agree. If we can find the most amicable way to do two things at once without overloading people, so that they don't feel like they're part of the process. We want them to feel like they're part of the process. If it's too much, they might not. And so I will take that back to planning and see if that's a course of action we want to take, and see if we can go that way.
Just in terms of the next steps, you have on this timeline, January 7th approval, a finalized town plan.
Finalize, yeah.
What, did you talk about where the select board fits into that? Like, what would be the next steps for the select board?
After that, that's us finalizing our work of the town plan.
So you don't need anything from the select board?
No, that's just us saying, we've done all the work, we're ready to show it as one full document.
Okay.
Then that's when we have to send it to adjacent towns and everybody and say, here's the one that's been finalized. That's not even approved. That comes up later for us to approve, and then for select board.
Did the timeline, that was the absolute minimum for warnings, and take into consideration, us having special meetings?
I mean, no, yeah, that's the minimum number of days.
Okay.
Yeah, that was John did that. He took the guidance from CVRPC and what the timeline should be, and he made a calendar.
So okay.
Yeah, so that's the minimum number of days that we can do in between meetings. And for you to warn, for us to warn, however it works. So I will take that back to planning and see if we can. I do agree with that. I think a process in which we, instead of our parallel being new plan while working on Conservation Commission's natural resources, the parallel is fixing the 2016 plan to just be exactly what we need, while just continuing to work on the 2025 now town plan, right, and going forward. I can take that back. That seems reasonable.
John had his hand up.
Well, thank you, Mark.
I was just gonna say that the timeline I drew up also does have a sort of a week between certain points where if the select board in fact recommended some changes, the planning commission would have time to go back and fold these into the document.
Yeah, so again, just the minimum, but you get
It's
some
a
of it.
minimum.
So that if you did say, okay, we have to change this, or there was big public comment, and a bunch of people came in and said, no, this should be this, then we would have the time to do it without having to extend the calendar.
Or we could write it,
Right,
either way.
right.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, this was a bombshell.
This was not your favorite week.
No, and I talked to Jan this week too, you know, Jan Olson, who was chair before me, who went, I was just told the end of 2024. Like, this is just one of those things that was just, nobody seemed to catch that, so.
Did you get any responses to your front porch forum post?
Nope.
Oh, that's good. Who was the person who figured it out?
Melanie. And she just happened to be reading the statute for something else. She was trying to make sure that this calendar was correct. And as she read through it, she just read that and she went, I read that and I go, wait a minute, what is that? And that's when she figured it out.
Man.
Yep, so. Again, like I said, I just don't feel bad because we're not the only town this has ever happened to, so.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, Barbara.
So Jared, in support
Yes,
of your conversation, having to go back now to the planning commission to let them know about this, just a reminder that they could either watch the Orca video or the Zoom video of this conversation
Okay.
before next Tuesday's meeting.
To see what we talked about, yeah,
Yeah, but they really want to understand where the select board,
right.
with all their comments.
Will it be up and available by then?
The Zoom would probably be available within 2 to 3 days. Orca's usually available by Saturday.
I mean, I'll put together talking points to send to them before our meeting, just so that they know what we talked about, and that'll be a part of the agenda for next week at our meeting.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate as long as it was a nice.
But I am also glad that
Side
the
dialogue.
RPC does have now Nikki is going to be sort of our point person on this, like, so we have somebody who's like, just tell me what you need, and they'll do that, so we've got that as well, so. It's not perfect at all or ideal, but it's something we can work through too. We just gotta figure out the best way to work through it, but we can.
Thanks, Jared.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Yeah.
they have worked really hard, we just now have to get this
Yeah,
done.
yeah. Well, we're with you.
We'll get it done,
Yeah.
there's not a problem. Just more excitement for all of us,
Yeah.
that's all it is.
All right.
Oh, you're welcome.
Moving to,
Did you want to see if anybody wanted to comment?
Bill, did you have any more commentary to add to that?
No, I do not.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for not. And
Thank you.
Larry had provide some brief commentary from you if you had any comments that you wanted to put out.
No, you just got to do what you got to do, it seems to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry. Okay, so our next agenda item, running a little behind schedule now, but try to keep things efficient. Preparations for the East Montpelier Fire Department joint meeting. So we have the interlocal to
2 weeks
discuss.
from now, we're gonna have a select board meeting with the fire department coming with their annual budget proposal. And then a few days later, we have our interlocal meeting. And so the purpose here is to refamiliarize you with the discussions around the updates to the interlocal. So it's been since August since we've met and talked about that. So hopefully had a chance to look at the draft that East Montpelier's attorney put together based on those discussions. And the other thing is, and I know it's kind of the 11th hour, but not really, is just to as I've been thinking about it, and Jordan and I have discussed this, it's something about the arrangement that's inherently confusing, at least to me, which is that you have this significant chunk of revenue, which is the ambulance insurance payments. It's $190,000 in their budget, and it's segregated from the rest of the revenue because it's treated differently. It's put into a combination of that capital contingency fund and then, the capital reserve fund. And it just strikes me as a very different way of accounting for, a significant chunk of revenue. And, if we're ever gonna talk about it, if we like that arrangement, does that still work for us? We would do it in the context of the interlocal agreement. So, just putting that out there, I don't,
What is it that bothers you about it?
Well, it's that, well, part of it's just structurally, when you read through the statement, the financial statements, you've got, this is on, they have fire and then they have ambulance. The ambulance, you have revenue of the various towns' contributions, then you have all the expenses, and then you get to the ambulance revenue. And then if you look at that section, then it starts getting really confusing because that money is getting transferred to the various funds. And it seems like additional is coming in, and it's just a confusing way to structure it. I also think that as someone who is voting on it, at town meeting, when you don't see that, that's kept, separate for the voters. So when Woodbury comes, they present their operating budget and their capital needs. And the towns vote on both of them. With East Montpelier, that's not the case. You just vote on operating. And they're funding, they seem to be funding most of their equipment needs, like, right, they came and asked for permission to buy an ambulance recently, because they have all the money they need apparently in there. But then, and I wasn't here for it, but we also took on a fire truck. And so that was like a one-off capital need that got warned. And so that strikes me as, I just find that confusing. And I don't, I'm not saying it's not in all of our best interests, but I'm not convinced that it is.
I agree it's confusing and I don't understand it, but I also definitely got the impression when they were explaining it, that they are very proud of the way that it's structured and that it's essentially, they see it as sort of self-funded because of the revenue from the ambulances, right? So that might be hard to change.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be very telling when we see their capital budget this year. And then we can, hopefully that'll be more clear. And then we can see how that revenue relates to their long-term capital planning, because that's part of what's bothering me as well.
Right, the long-term capital planning piece. Yes, that's a theme of yours, Kari.
I think that, I don't think that they're necessarily mutually exclusive. Like, I think, I think it is important, to recognize that this is a service that was structured with the intention of being partially or substantially funded by the ambulance service, which is somewhat unique to this organization. I don't think that they necessarily get as much credit as they could for how much that revenue offsets their operational costs or the capital expenses because of the way that it's structured. It's so far, I guess I've participated in like 2.5 of these cycles, and every time it doesn't ever really feel like it's getting any more transparent. And it seems like they're constantly struggling to figure out, like, we got increasing expenses and staffing is another big part of that. There's a huge part of the dialogue around the staffing and how the staffing of the organization gets funded. And then when you try to dissect things to see where there's opportunities to fund the staffing or make heads or tails of what their financial needs to get the staffing that they need, it gets confusing because you don't feel like you have a full grasp of what the income is for and how that income is offsetting, some of the operational costs. And it's tricky. It's a, for lack of better phrasing, you know, it's a complicated arrangement. You have two municipalities who are involved, but then there's a whole other dialogue around the other communities that contract, for the, ambulance services as well. And then that even further complicates, the math, I think, for the two municipalities that are on the hook for maintaining all the rest of the infrastructure associated with the organization and planning financially for it responsibly. You know, we have a financial obligation to feel like we have a good grasp on how the organization is being managed. And it's tough sometimes when you're getting into the weeds of the budget and things are split out quite clearly there. And, you know, I when Kari and I discussed this last, you know, I think if we want to see certain changes or adjustments made, and just how the financials are structured and reported, you know, I think we also have kind of an obligation to help facilitate that and say, like, this is what we were thinking it would look like, and kind of work through that dialogue, as opposed to, you know, I want to be careful that we're not, you know, tasking the fire department with this needs to be better and you guys need to do a better job. That's not the message, I don't think, that we're trying to send here, or try to communicate. But it seems to be a point of kind of perennial confusion.
And yeah, and maybe it's us, maybe we're having a hard time thinking through what's clear to them about how they're structured. I guess it's, in some ways, it's as simple as this, that they have a budgeted 192,000 in revenue. Based on the capital plans we've seen, that's more than enough. So what's happening? Like, I need to understand the full picture of that a little bit better.
So you're,
2 weeks from now, hopefully they'll be able to help me understand.
will they have updated financials for us anytime soon?
So they've already presented their audit for last year, right? They did that when they were in. There is a list in the interlocal of what they're supposed to provide for this next meeting, which is their budget, basically, their operating budget, their multi-year capital budget, their list of equipment.
Which they didn't do last year.
Yeah, and it's all supposed to be provided by December 1st.
Yeah, last year they gave it to us at the meeting.
Yeah.
But to be fair, they were brand new.
Yeah.
And they were struggling to figure out what they were doing, and maybe that's some of why it seems so confusing to us, because they're still learning how to do it properly.
Yeah, we want to make it work.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be good to refresh here before we
Yeah,
get
no,
into
this
those
is
conversations.
helpful. This is the agreement we got in August, the draft that you sent around again.
Yeah, so this is the second revision, because we met.
This is the one where the lawyer went through it, right?
Yeah, and then we gave them feedback, I believe, didn't we? And then, so this is a second. I don't think we've actually discussed this as a group, this revised.
I think the East Montpelier administrator, Jennifer, did that.
Oh, is that right?
The JD stuff, is it her, Jennifer Devine?
Oh, yeah.
She did that.
Okay. Okay.
If I could just go back for a second, would you mind, talking about the capital plan? I mean, if the ambulance service was taking in more money than the capital plan required over a certain amount of time, shouldn't some of that money be returned to the towns?
I mean,
Well, there's also operational expenses, right?
well, exactly. So,
And we pay 1/3 of the operating budget and they pay 2/3 of the operating budget.
Well, exactly. So if there was more money than it was needed, it should go against the operational budget.
And in fact, this is what we did last year, right? When we had that $15,000 savings. That's where this came from. And that was, and that was not a happy conversation, but that was sort of that this whole theme sort of underlaid that whole thing. Is like the towns need some relief. We think the fire department can afford it here. Yeah, I think Bill's concern is what I'm driving at as well. And, I'm all for them having a well-funded capital fund and contingency fund.
And I feel exactly the same way. Yeah.
We just need to understand it in the context of their needs.
Right. Yeah, and stability and control, it's hard to feel confident when you don't feel like you've got a full view on what the fund balances are and what the plan is for, replacing certain things. I think we can be fortunate in that they've been able to fund things out of that budget, but there's still a lot of vagueness around it, and we know that there are increasing pressures on the operation budget or on the operating budget relative to staffing costs. So it's going to get more painful at some point.
But why does that require a change in the interlocal agreement? Isn't that just require a change in the way they show us what they're doing?
Well, the interlocal specifies that all of that ambulance revenue is going into first the contingency fund, with the remainder going into the capital fund. So none of that hits operations. And I guess I just wonder, should some of it? It depends. It depends on what they need for capital, and what we all agree that they need.
You'd actually like to make some changes to that section.
Well, I'm not convinced I do, but it strikes me as if I were designing this from scratch, you would have all your revenues together, right? You'd budget what the towns are contributing and what the ambulance is gonna bring in and anything else. That's your pot of money, and then, or actually you work the other way. You start with your expenses and you figure out what revenue you need to cover those expenses. And that's how Woodbury did it. That's how we do it as a town. I guess that's what I'm reacting to.
Can I say a little?
Yes, Rose.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I told you or you knew this, but I was the administrative assistant at the fire department when the ambulance started, the ambulance service. And Toby was a really strong advocate. He did a great job explaining this. So basically, the money gets, like you said, so much goes into contingency, and off of that, they pay for like paramedic intercept and ambulance billing, and the rest goes into the capital reserve fund. So basically, they keep generating this savings account with all the different columns, so that when it's time to purchase a $500,000 piece of equipment, a fire truck, they can kick in a substantial amount, thereby saving the towns the cost. So instead of saying, we need a new fire truck, please give us 450,000, like on this last one, I think they contributed 200,000, and so they only had to ask for a smaller amount. So that's basically the reason that they do this. And so Woodbury doesn't generate any income.
Right.
They don't have an ambulance service, they don't generate, so they are dependent on taxpayer funding. And so, yeah, that's how it was set up, and it's kind of how it works. I think you're gonna find out a lot more information when you meet with them.
Yeah.
And I think you'll be pleased, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
And it does seem that as they come to the town every 3, 4, 5 years, I don't know how often, with additional equipment needs, then the revenue is not enough to cover all of those. And so. if
Or they have
you
something like a fire truck.
Right, so if you skimmed off sort of some of the revenue on years that has a lot of revenue and low capital expense to cover, to reimburse the towns for some of that, the operating expenses, then it might just come back to the towns 3 years later when they need a new fire truck. So
Yeah,
I'm not, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if it's not just 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I don't disagree that it's confusing and complicated, but I don't know that moving monies from one pot to another is actually gonna save any money in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other way to look at it is if we could can work through this dialogue, there's probably an argument to be made that there could be an opportunity for the department to have a little more autonomy over their capital expenditures, because if there's a plan in place and there's a fund that is transparently funded from revenues and operational costs are under control, then the towns are gonna feel like that it's under, it's under control. We don't need to approve a certain amount being spent, because it's all part of a particular plan, and that there's a fund that is fully funded. I think when we were having the conversation, we checked in with Toby on this, and he kind of helped explain the context and the whys, and it does help and it does make sense, but it's gotten more complicated now as the staffing costs and the equipment costs have gotten more complex and more expensive. And there are other supplemental contracts that are being entered into that also use those resources and require certain staffing allocations. And so
You're gonna be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Okay, that's good, great.
I took the minutes of the board meeting.
Yeah.
last week.
Okay.
Just saying.
Yeah. But otherwise, nobody's been disagreeing in any of the meetings about some of
No,
the
you have to
adjustments.
Understand.
Yeah, you have to understand it. Great.
When is that joint meeting? I just realized it's not on my calendar.
the 12th, is that right?
Thursday.
It's in my memo, I know that.
Yeah, I think it's Thursday, the 12th,
Thanks.
right? Yeah, Thursday. Okay, well, ruminate on that, and I guess if folks have specific questions, we can't really have any additional dialogue around it, but if we could send in questions to Ari and start to kind of coalesce any of those before the
I'm
meeting.
curious why in the very beginning, you left out shall automatically renew we're talking about
Oh,
clause 1, would it just be for 5 years? Why is that open? If it's gonna
The
be,
initial terms for 5 years, and then thereafter shall automatically renew.
for success of 5 years, wouldn't that be the renewal term, or were you thinking that would be up for discussion?
where are you referring to?
It's
So
paragraph
it's the
1.
third paragraph, it's numbered 1 and called term. And it says the initial term of the agreement shall be for 5 years.
Let me pull it up. So it's not my language.
No, it's mine, but, I thought it was gonna renew for success of 5 years. What I was doing was using the old language, and I was just curious why that was left open.
I don't know, we'll have to ask. I don't know what we
That
want.
wasn't you.
What's that?
That was
you, this came from their lawyer.
Oh, so this was Jim Barlow writing that.
Mm,
Came from their town
Town
administrator.
administrator.
Oh, okay, so
Jennifer
maybe they
Devine.
wanna discuss it then. Maybe that's all it is.
Yeah, my guess is they just want to discuss it at the same,
Oh, yeah.
ratify it, have a discussion around what the renewal terms are.
I
and
see
just
what you're
ratify it at the
referring to. Why
same
is there
time.
a blank there? Why didn't we?
Yeah, I just thought we were gonna use the old agreement, which said 5 years.
Yeah.
That's okay, we'll talk about it.
Are there any other questions about the interlocal that stand out? We want to discuss? So if there isn't, I think we should probably move on.
Yeah, well, looks great. I'm so glad they sent it to the lawyer.
Yeah.
All those things I didn't realize needed to be in there.
And cleaning up of acronyms. No, abatement.
Right,
So,
so, as of last year, the select board has the ability to abate the de minimis amounts. And you did this last year, and, thought it'd be helpful to do it now, before we start the delinquent tax process.
What
So,
was the cap last year? For some reason, I thought it was $10, but I know this is 5.
I think I think you have the option, you could do 10, I actually think you went up to 15.
I think we did.
We haven't done,
Yeah, and I think that was the request, and you said, okay. The data I provide, most of these, there's 10 that are under $1. And then there's one additional that's under 5, and then there's one additional between 5 and 10. So I don't really have a strong preference about that, but it makes all the sense in the world to abate the 10 that are below $1.
Yeah.
And honestly, the under $5 is just not worth the time to, it's not worth Sandra's time and the postage and all that.
Do we have to do this as an action item? I thought we at one time had discussed a policy revision that authorized the treasurer to make those abatements without kicking it up to the select board.
It was only for 1 year, or is that the problem?
Isn't that something I pulled up the minutes for and sent it to you?
Yeah, that was in the memo. I think that just.
That was just a
It
decision
was-
last year.
Right, it was fear of people knowing that it's always this and $9 less. There's something.
Yeah, right.
Right, that was the proposal last year, was for 2 years or something, and you weren't comfortable, you said, come back.
But realistically.
I mean, you could certainly do that for less than $1. I mean, I just know that's just not controversial, I wouldn't think,
Right.
but, although, what do I know?
Yeah.
But might not be a bad thing just to have this check in, and
That's fine.
gives you
Right,
insight
there's
into
no
how,
harm.
what's it look like, what's going on with tax collections. Overall, tax collections are about where they were last year at this time.
Yeah.
So that's good news.
Well, good. So unless anybody needs any further discussion on that, I'd entertain a motion to authorize Kari to abate 2024 unpaid property taxes for the amount of less than $5. Cover it.
Yeah,
That's fine.
Okay.
so moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I just asked a clarifying question. So it's actually $4.99 and below. It's less than $5, not inclusive.
Yeah, that's fine.
That is the language.
That's fine.
Okay.
$4.99,
Less than 5. Yeah.
keep it at less than 5,
That's what they are, yeah.
Yeah.
so that means $4.99.
Right.
And
Town reports, we've got discussion of draft select board report and next steps. Which, let's get those open. And did a lot of work in preparing the select board report. right?
I think it'll go through a few more drafts as we work through the budget, and, but I hope I've got an outline, at least a structure that you're happy with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it looked great.
I like the separating out the ongoing projects, almost done projects. Done projects. I just like,
Triage.
that worked really well for me.
Especially since Curtis Pond was in the almost done.
Right?
Yeah.
Substantially complete.
I mean, I think that, it really captured, what we're trying to communicate and the challenges with what we know are going to be, you know, staffing needs. I don't even really want to call them challenges. You know, I think all of the communities have a scope of work that needs a ton of work, and it's really hard for the volunteers of the select board and to do them. And so the communities really have to figure out how do you staff the town administration so that it's right sized for the scope of work that needs to be done. That's the greater point. And how we get the healthcare costs down.
So Barbara, when does this have to be ready?
Well, I didn't bring my key deadlines, but my request to all the boards, committees, and commissions is to have your report to me by December 15th. And most of the other boards, committees, and commissions can meet that, if not December 30th. Typically, you guys go into January, and that's okay. But I would say not beyond the first January meeting of the select board.
Well, until we finalize the budget though, because we always want to write about why we're.
Right, and the pie chart goes in there.
Yeah.
But that's also when the budget's due as well,
Yeah.
because all that has to go into the warning and so forth, so. I will give you a drop dead tomorrow if you need a drop dead.
No, I'm just thinking.
Okay.
Think through what we're doing.
Maybe, have any other comments, and are there areas where you'd like some further input? I mean, I see mine in there.
Yes, I assigned you. I mean, I figure you're the one who's researching.
Yes. And we've had some conversation. Carrie and I were talking about how that could play out. I think it would be, well, so there was some feedback from regional planning on what should be considered the practice, and that's not that different from what we've been discussing so far. It's a substantial enough purchase that it's really kind of up to us to decide how. It's certainly within the purview of the statutes for the select board to just to make purchases or sales of real estate relative to the needs of the community. But given the price point and other considerations that go into how the parcel is going to be used, the recommendation is like, if you want to set a standard for sending it to Australian ballot, that's how it should probably play out. So that would then require a hearing in advance, so that to a certain extent relieves the obligation or need to put it in this section of the town report, because we're going to have a hearing and presentations worked through in advance. So there's an informational hearing. And there's also some dialogue to continue to work throughout the board and with the Pelchucks as well. So we'll be adding that to a meeting if we can, because in the next couple of weeks. so that we can just make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're putting forth one for an Australian ballot. It's gonna be, you know, the recommendation essentially that we're making to the town.
Wouldn't it have to be a bond issue? If we were gonna do that for that amount of money?
It's not literally a bond, but that was the advice,
Right.
is treat it equivalent to a bond.
Treat it
It's
equivalent.
long-term financing.
We wouldn't be taking a loan from the municipal, oh, no, because.
No, because it'd be owner finance.
It's a loan,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah,
And
but it's not a bond.
They were saying that's, you know, well, that's a reason to think about it, putting it up for a vote, because people are going to be voting on the financing of it for years to come, you know, through the annual budget.
Well.
So, yeah. I had a similar thought, and when we were talking about it last week, I was like, how much information, because there'd be a lot of information and dialogue to work through, and how much of that do we want to put in the town report, and does that now become just this unwieldy thing that we're trying to squeeze into the town report and add costs, printing costs, all kinds of different things, the more we were talking about the process involved for an Australian ballot, it actually kind of relieves a lot of that, and we just end up taking a lot of that dialogue in advance of town meeting.
Well, I think to the extent we can.
To the extent we can, yeah. Yeah, that's the commentary I've got on that, otherwise. I don't know. Okay. Well, thank you, Anne, for taking that on and having that prepared. The special features to be included, I'm not quite sure what that is.
Oh, is it? Go ahead.
So I just would like you guys to help me think of anything that has happened in 2024 that we want to recognize in the town report. For example, when Rose retired after all her long years of service on the select board, we did a tribute page for Rose. When Jan Ansel retired last year, 2 years ago from the legislature, we did a tribute to Janet and so forth. Last year we did the flood. So just to help me remember, if you think of anything that there will be a dam report because CPA is gonna submit something, so that's being covered. But if there's anything else that you can think of, don't just trust my memory. Be my backup system. If there's anything we need to do, a little special feature on in the 2024 report, let me know, please.
All right, thank you.
Tomorrow's Cy Lamberton's funeral.
Oh, yes.
With that, I think we can move on to the 2025 select board meeting schedule.
So Barbara drafted a calendar for the full year, and you can take a look at. I think in particular, just be familiar with January and February. And that includes some timelines like signing the warning in early January, and sounds like we need to prepare a hearing for the Australian ballot question at least. So we'll plan for that for late February.
I think that, yeah, that's gonna be the second meeting in February. It could be as, like, I think it was just a week before town meeting or something like
Within
that.
10 days.
Yeah, 10 days.
So
So there's always a backstop of that, but it does seem like trying to get it in February, the second meeting in February
probably
would
the
be more
24th,
appropriate. Yeah,
February 24th.
yeah.
You can actually hold a public hearing on any question related to the budget or public question all the way up to the day before town meeting. You can have it as late as March 3rd. I don't think you'd want to, but you could, statutorily you can.
We had mentioned adding, what else were we going to be adding to February? There was I think it was the Conservation Commission. We wanted to check in with the Conservation Commission. And I'm also wondering about appointments. So we were talking a little bit about, or you circulated a list of appointments beforehand, but I think a nice way to maybe consider appointments or hear about reappointments would be to take a look at candidates for reappointment or to hear about candidates who are wishing to be reappointed in February. And even if we're obviously not going to be making those decisions until after town meeting. But I think that kind of establishes a nice way to get ahead of the conversation if there's going to be a specific recommendation from like committee chairs that this position is up for reappointment and this individual is interested in being reappointed. I think we should still make a call for any interest in appointment relative to that, but
So I have that on your calendar for March the 10th.
Right.
You want that moved up to February,
yes.
okay?
What does it look like? You're asking committees and commissions to give you sort of a rundown of what seats are up and who's
Well,
interested?
so I know what seats are up. So what I've done in the past is I first email all the board, committee, and commission chairs. I let them know of their membership, whose terms are expiring in the spring. And I check with the chair to make sure that they want those people reappointed. So far, everybody's always said yes.
Right.
If they said no, I'd be coming to you guys for a private discussion. But so I always check with the chair first. Once I thought the chair is okay, that he wants his committee members whose terms are expiring to be reappointed, then I go to those committee members and say, your term will be expiring at the end of March 2025. Do you wish to be reappointed for another 3-year term, 4-year term, 5-year term, all depending on which one it is? And then I know how many seats are we looking. Then I know who's up for reappointment, according to you guys, and what seats are going to be vacant and how many do we need to fill. And I've emailed you a couple of times asking you if I could use that open position spreadsheet again to do that recruitment. So I can move everything up a couple of weeks from when I was going to be doing it to meet your February request to have that first meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to like make the call for these are the vacancies. I think it'd be nice to get ahead of whatever the interest is going to be. Otherwise it just ends up getting pushed out further after the organizational meeting once town meeting has happened. And if we are going to have kind of a mindful and kind of deliberative approach to appointments, it would be nice to have kind of a sense of what the interest is in those open positions leading up to town meeting. So at least there is a little bit of information coming in beforehand. So I feel like we can make timely decisions on the other side, even though we're not going to be able to make an explicit recommendation or decision. I'm just thinking about how like the kind of played out before with the DRB, and there was a disconnect or a feeling of disconnect, and I think it just could be helpful to start some of that dialogue with the committees before, so that we can have some of those recommendations in hand. We can start to get some sense of what the interest may be from other people who may want to join, and whether or not we want to consider appointing other people to fill vacancies.
Do you like that open position spreadsheet
Yeah.
format? So I'll know I can use that, or?
I think so, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you. There are a couple other things on
Yeah.
this, schedule. If we could look at May and June.
Mhm.
This year, this calendar year of 2024, there were a lot of holidays on Mondays. This coming year, there's only one, Memorial Day. So, your second meeting in May falls on Memorial Day. So we're making the proposal that you skip a Memorial Day meeting and move your first June meeting up a week. So that there's not such a long span between your first meeting in May and your first meeting in June, and split the difference. So we're wondering if you would like to consider that scheduling change.
And there's 5 Mondays in June.
Mhm. If somebody else had a strong opinion.
And I think town office staff has a strong opinion
Yeah.
about not having a select board meeting on Memorial Day.
Yeah, no, I
So
think,
skipping, your proposal is skipping May 26th and then having a June meeting.
And then
on the
moving the
9th.
June 9th meeting up to June 3rd.
Oh, moving it to.
Second.
Second, yes, exactly, to June 2nd.
So it'd be 2 cycles in a row with an extra week between meetings.
mhm.
That is the end result.
What does that do for signing board orders and such, though?
It'll work fine.
Okay,
I would not be present on the 3rd of June,
It's June 2nd.
on the 2nd of June, sorry.
I would think preliminarily speaking, I don't see any reason not to, and then if we get closer to the date. And we think, oh goodness, we have a lot of work to do,
Yeah,
we could
Yeah.
rearrange and have a special
I think
meeting.
we'll
on it.
be revisiting anything
Yeah.
after town meeting
Right,
anyway, there will be a new member or two.
Yeah,
On paper, it sounds like a good idea.
yeah,
It sounds like we can also agree to not meet on Memorial Day.
Yes.
One way or another.
one way or the other, yeah.
Okay, and then there's two others. So I was proposing, we talked about doing a volunteer appreciation event. And we've now got it in our budget for fiscal year 26. Tegan and I have talked to the Friends of Calais about the possibility of them helping us with that, especially with any related cost. Because they do have some funds, but maybe they just provided this paper goods, the supplies and so forth, but then also they might make it be a potluck so that we're not using a caterer. So my thought was that if it's going to be a meal and it's gonna be community-wide, then we don't want to have it too close to a town meeting community lunch. So my thought went to Fall Foliage Festival that very first Friday, when a year ago, when you were all brand new and Tegan was brand new and Mark Mahaly was our new representative of the legislature, we did the open house here. And then this year we made it be a town officials meet and greet. And this year we opened it up to include all the board committee and commission chairs, those folks. And it wasn't all that well attended. But maybe the timing is good, halfway between two town meeting lunches, and do it that first Friday in October with Friends of Calais help. Are there too many meals happening related to Fall Foliage Festival already?
No, I don't think so. And the community center is talking about maybe not doing its brunch next year and doing something different instead. So I think that from a fall foliage calendar standpoint would work.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the idea of working with and coordinating with the Friends of Calais to help. So I'd sometimes I like struggle with like the the self-congratulatory feel of us scheduling and budgeting for some of these things, considering we fall into that category of appreciation to a certain extent. So they seem like a good group to kind of solidify that, if we can make that a recurring activity for them. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and if in fact the community center doesn't do a brunch, there's overlap between Friends of Calais and Community Center Program Committee. And there may be some, maybe some overlap,
Okay,
planning in a good way there.
okay, so this is
Yeah.
a target date?
Yeah.
To do this and make it be a volunteer appreciation?
I like
Okay.
that.
Nice.
Okay, good. Okay, then the last one, I guess, is the December scheduling. And if you guys feel like you're going to want to meet 3 days before Christmas, or if you would like to move it up 1 week to mid-December. Of course, you'll be right where you are this time next year, right in the middle of budget and everything else. But while we're looking at the schedule for the year, just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, considering how the dialogue has been working out this year, I think that the goal would be to bump it forward if schedules permitted it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think tentatively planning on that makes sense as well. Anybody object? No.
Sounds good.
Can always add an extra budget meeting.
Right,
Yes.
5 Mondays in December as well.
Right.
Ari, was there anything else on the calendar that you wanted to bring to their attention?
I think that's good.
I think that, yeah. Thank you for pulling that together, and thank you for putting in the joint meetings and the fire department meetings. That's super helpful. And I think if we could also, I think, get those integrated into like the 2025 Outlook calendar, then they're on there and they serve as reminders for those of us who are digitally connected that way. That it helps me a lot. I've been adding them to my personal calendar, but great. It's particularly helpful for keeping track of those extracurricular ones that are so easy to slip through the cracks, scheduling wise. And the next item we have on there is talking about the select board meeting start time that we started discussing last time, and we wanted to kind of postpone that decision until we had some feedback from Rose on how that would impact her participation. And your feedback was circulated by Barbara.
She wrote, sent it directly, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I remember who I sent it to.
Sorry. So it doesn't sound like that's going to be, you'd be able to do one of them a month, for sure. And then the second one is iffy. So, worst case scenario, we'd have to have kind of a backup plan for the first hour, for the second Monday, or two.
Well,
Or
if you
just
start the meetings at 5, I usually work till 6.
Till
Today
6,
I
I
work
see.
till 6:30.
So it'd be an hour and a half.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you also had some input about wanting to prepare for dialing your commitment back a little bit, come April, which is a perfectly reasonable request, and exciting
It's only
news.
been 20 years.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure.
No, my daughter's 35. I've been doing this for 20 years.
I'm sure she appreciates you recognizing the priority of her new arrival over the select board facilitation
Yeah.
and duties.
And
Yeah.
if Tegan is potentially toying with interest in taking over, would it make sense to have Rose do one and Tegan do one for those in-between months and sort of gradual transition?
That was me who asked about Tegan. That wasn't Tegan who asked about Tegan.
Oh.
So when Kari and Jordan and Jamie and I talked about this, seems like almost a month ago, it was on election day. That's what it was. I asked,
Seems like a month ago.
yeah. I asked without, unbeknownst to Tegan, because she's here anyway, typically. I asked if Tegan was willing to take minutes, would the select board be willing to pay her as if she was any other select board recording secretary, because it's not in her job description as town clerk. And so the two of them indicated, yes, they believe the select board would favorably consider that. I know we don't have an answer yet, but I was the one who asked that question because Tegan was not part of that discussion. Tegan is not crazy about the idea of doing this. She will step in if needed, but this is not really what she wants to do.
Right, okay. So regardless, if we found somebody else, we could do that type of a staggered transition.
It's really nice to have someone who knows what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's hard to step in and take minutes for a group when you don't really even know what you're talking about. So I appreciate, first of all, congratulations. Grandma.
Yeah.
Do you know what you're gonna be called yet?
No, haven't decided yet.
I don't let the child choose. I've seen that play out not favorably a couple of times already.
And
Thank you.
it was really, really adorable when all my grandchildren called me grandmommy.
Oh.
And now they're in their mid to late 20s and they're still calling me
Yeah.
grandmommy.
Yeah.
That's your name.
I'm like, you don't have to call me that anymore. So thank you for sharing that news with us, but it may be time to actually consider while there's some transition time.
Well, I guess that's what I was gonna say, and maybe without making a definitive decision right now, maybe the thing to do would be to put a call out to see if anybody would be interested in serving in that particular role, and doing it after December. Yeah, because we have some different scheduling for December anyway. That's kind of wonky, and so let's just try to get on the other side of December.
Okay, I'll check in with Rose again and see how her timing is, and we'll look at doing that maybe sometime in early 2025.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to have anybody step in.
I
and do
know.
what Rose does. We've been spoiled both with the history and with the aptitude, but I do like, I guess I kind of like the idea of giving somebody the opportunity to onboard, so to speak, with that extra meeting, and just see how it goes. Okay, great. Let's table that then, for now, until after the new year, and reports. Sorry.
That discussion was about what to do for the recording secretary, but what about your meeting time? You could still look to change the meeting time if you're wanting to do that.
Does anybody still feel really strongly about trying to push the meeting time forward? I think they kind of go hand in hand, and we could do it.
I feel pretty strongly about the 18th since I did
Right.
that,
But we could just warn that one as earlier, if without having to do a readoption of the rules.
oh, right, of course. Okay.
Is that okay with everybody else?
Wait, the 18th we had at 4 o'clock already, right?
Yeah, the 18th, you chose 4 o'clock.
Oh, I didn't realize we were chosen. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you, guys.
And I won't be here for that.
Right. That was already, yeah.
And also Orca, you said Dr.
No.
Orca.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not doing the 5 o'clock, or you're tabling it?
I think it's probably worth just tabling until after the new year. And unless Barbara and Kari feel that it would make a significant change to readopt. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. So reports and Curtis Pond.
So there was a meeting, there was an inspection on Friday morning last weekend, I believe. Where dam safety came and met with myself and the contractors and both Michael and Jeff Tucker, who are the two engineers from D&K. And they agreed at that meeting that the dam was substantially complete, which is the designation needed to start refilling the cove with water. So that's been about a 5-day process. The water on either side of the coffer dam now is about the same. The pond level is still low, as it often is this time of year, so there's not yet water flowing over the new dam. But hopefully with a little precipitation coming up in the next week, we'll get there. They are basically landscaping at this point for the next couple of days, doing final site cleanup. Then they're off Thursday, Friday for Thanksgiving weekend, and they'll come back Monday after Thanksgiving to pull out the coffer dam. And they expect that to take 3 days, at which they will pack up their equipment and go home. It's pretty much done.
Wow.
Yeah,
I heard that they had actually started pulling some of the riprap out of the front.
all the riprap is out.
Oh,
of the
it's all
front.
out.
Yep, the riprap has been removed. They did a really nice job. They took their narrow bucket excavator and trenched behind the historic dam, and then used their big bucket to straighten the stone wall. So it used to be tipped pretty significantly. It's now vertical again and all like a smooth stone.
It looks really nice. It looks like they rebuilt it.
Yeah, it looks better than it's looked in 100 years, that's for sure.
Wow. But is it historically accurate?
It is. It's
How
how
could
it
it not
was
be? It's
built,
all in the
as
same
built.
spot. We just kind of pushed it back a little bit.
And there was a bunch of historic stone that was taken out of the ground during various excavations, so they've reused that stone, lining the spillway with a stone wall and sort of some retaining walls along the brook. They've done a really nice job.
Oh, congratulations.
Part of this,
Was the riprap retained?
it was not. That aspect of it happened really quickly. And I mentioned that I thought that in the original agreement, it was gonna come to the town. And then the next day it was sort of gone. I think
We never indicated where it would go. They
Right.
posed that question early on.
they did, and we never really clarified or made a plan. I think potentially if we wanted to, we could have a conversation around that, but I don't know that we really, like, it was always a question if we really wanted it or had a place to store it anyway. And since it looks like the actual construction is gonna come in under budget, my gut is to not worry about it unless others feel otherwise.
I don't feel that, I mean, in the context of the project coming under budget, I think it's a little bit more of a moot point, but you know, there was a certain amount of dialogue around, you know, paying for the time to haul things away and et cetera, and that was paid for by FEMA. So property of the community. So to the extent that we could have made use for it, and it would have offset costs in the future, it would have been nice to retain it, but, that, I guess that's my piece on that. It's a little disappointing, but, you know, if they spend, if they went if they spent many days and trucking hours, I think it would probably be a different conversation.
It really wasn't.
It was like a day.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think some of it was reused, cause they had to way over excavate on the ice
Right.
side of the dam. And there was concern about just backfilling with soil, you know, a significant 6 or 8 foot stretch of lawn. And so a bunch of it went into that for main stabilization as well. So by the time the
There
final
was so much
pieces,
work,
it really, I mean, I think it was 2 or 3 dump truck loads. It wasn't days of work.
Is there gonna be a ribbon cutting in sometime?
I,
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah, we did.
right,
cut
we
that
did
ribbon.
like a launching. I think we'll probably do a big party in the spring.
We're gonna like send rubber ducks over this little way or something
We
like.
probably should.
I think
Inflatable
March-
beavers.
I think Marge promised we could all sit on her porch and toast the new dams.
Larry at one point promised me he would throw us a big party,
Oh.
including
Well, then he can have the
purchasing the
rocks.
supplies.
Then he's got the
So,
rocks.
I'll circle
Let's
back.
wait till we get the last bill.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly, yeah. I don't know, it seems cold and damp and busy to try and do a party at the dam this time of year.
Yeah, no, wait till the spring when
I
it's
think
all
it'd be better
beautiful.
We live in
Yeah.
Vermont. It's too cold to be outside. Another couple of weeks, we're gonna be skating on it. We'll just,
Right,
That's almost.
yeah,
we'll do Mardi Gras in February, yeah,
that would be fun.
a dam celebration.
Barbara, is there anything from Tegan?
No, I asked her and she didn't have anything.
Okay, great. And
A
Kari,
couple quick things. One, I wanted to thank Barbara for all her diligence on tax payment processing. It's a lot of work.
a lot of work.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. And that leads to the second point, which is earlier in the year, we had a request for additional tax payments. A scheme to spread out.
For,
And I let Jan know that I'm definitely not in favor of that. It is a lot of work, you know, you have to, it's a whole process, noticing it and processing all the payments, that's hours and hours and hours. And then there are questions galore from residents and escrow companies and attorneys. And then there are just weird things that happen, mistakes get made and, blessed by Barbara, but other people make mistakes and some of them are really tricky to sort out. And so I just don't think it's in the town's interest. But what I do plan on doing is this direct debit option where people can sign up for automatic clearinghouse draw. And first year, I'd like it to just do the 2 payments. And you sign up and say, you can draw from my bank those 2, but if that goes well, then we could potentially add options down the road and, maybe quarterly or something like that. I just want to make sure that process works smoothly.
Yeah, and I think in the context of Barbara reducing hours, especially, I mean, Jan's point's well received and people, we should do everything we can to help people facilitate, some sort of structured planning. I think that I like the debit, the automatic debiting opportunity. If people can sign up for as many.
want that money to disappear.
She wasn't overly disappointed when we emailed about it. So.
Yeah.
Last thing is I just got a notice we had our annual fire alarm inspection here and this panel has a problem with it. It's the trouble sounder in the panel needs to be replaced. So I have a bill for, or a proposal for $1,400, $1,388. It's not budgeted, obviously. I'd like to just pursue that and plan on taking that from the town hall reserve fund. And then you would see that in a future warrant. Is that okay to pursue that? Okay. We'll do that.
Thank you, Barry. I take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Bill, you
Aye.
sure?
Hi,
Thank you, Jordan. That was fun.
Yeah, sorry, the wheels came off there.
Yeah.
we were so
Fire?
close.
Trouble.
I know, you were doing so well.
December, fire.
I could feel my own eyes glaze over and then lost momentum.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. See you later.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. We're still recording.
Yeah, other towns do it. Basically, you have a written agreement.
With the numbers.
Yeah, so it's very confidential, right? You're handing over your.
I had one.
It's like.
Not that, but that's closest, it was, I think it was.
Put that on file, you know, put it into the.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what you're saying.
Oh, so this is the actual
Yeah, this is the actual thing.
It was remarkable. I looked like the day that they were pulling out the riprap, I looked
Yeah.
over at Louise and I was like,
Way more.
damn, looks straighter. Did they?
Right.
Yeah.
So I made sure it was extra money, my checking account, and I knew.
Yeah, it's really.
It was gonna take a long time for that train to clear, so I, you know.
Yeah.
I think I even like used extra money over in my savings account, and then my nephew did some electrical